2768 black skeleton and NBSP. Dozens of experts were fighting near the ancient God flower. Ah! With a miserable cry, a sixth-stage true God expert was killed, and fresh blood flowed all over the ground. In the battle, there were a few domain lord-level characters. Existences at the sixth stage of true God realm were naturally not enough. The others looked around and did not fight for it. An ancient God flower was not worth it. Even more people rushed into the depths of the valley. Perhaps there were more ancient God flowers in the valley. Lu Ming took a look but did not make a move. An ancient God flower had limited uses, so there was no need to reveal their true strength in advance. Lu Ming moved his body and headed deep into the valley. As expected, more and more ancient God flowers appeared in the depths of the valley. Every time an ancient God flower appeared, it would cause a huge battle. Many people would fight for it. Although the cultivation of divine power was the main focus of the primal universe, the strength of the divine body was also very important. Some secret skills had requirements for the strength of the divine body. Furthermore, the stronger the divine body, the stronger the life force. Treasures that could improve the divine body were all very precious, so the tie-in was naturally intense. However, Lu Ming did not make a move. He increased his speed and rushed into the depths of the valley. "Kid, be careful. Someone is trying to kill you." At this moment, a voice came from Lu Ming's sea of consciousness. "Someone wants to kill me." Lu Ming did not freeze for a moment. He was on guard. Wait, this sound. All of a sudden, Lu Ming stopped in his tracks, his face filled with shock. That was because the voice that had just sounded in his sea of consciousness was very unfamiliar. It was not the voice of the measure formula or the battle formula, but another voice. However, in his sea of consciousness, besides the tie formula and the battle formula, was there anything else? Who is it? Who is in my sea of consciousness? Lu Ming shouted with his mental energy. "Kid, there's something in your painting." This time, it was the sound of the tie formula. A painting? Lu Ming immediately thought of Jingyu's portrait. However, the remnant mark that Jingyu had left behind had already disappeared. The portrait on it had also disappeared. Could there be something else in the portrait? "Kid, what's there to be surprised about? Ever since you obtained Jingyu's portrait, I've been around. I've been observing you all this time, but you just didn't notice me." The unfamiliar voice from before rang out once more, and as expected, it came from the portrait of Jingyu. Then, Lu Ming was surprised to see an arm stretching out from the portrait. However, this arm was not made of flesh and blood. It was a piece of bone that was black in color, as if it was made of black jade. Then, Lu Ming saw a skeleton crawl out of Jing Ye's portrait. It was a skeleton that was as black as jade. Lu Ming was dumbfounded. There was actually a skeleton hidden within the startled feather painting. What was going on? Who was this skeleton? Could it be Jingyu himself? In an instant, dozens of thoughts flashed through Lu Ming's mind. "Brat, don't be too surprised. I've told you that someone wants to kill you. They're already close. If you want to die, then continue to be in a daze." The skeleton continued. Lu Ming immediately collected his thoughts. As expected, he felt waves of cold aura spreading towards him. At the same time, a dark-skinned elder rapidly approached Lu Ming and a sword-light stabbed at the back of Lu Ming's heart. Fast, accurate, and ruthless. It was done in one go, a one-hit kill. Furthermore, it was shockingly powerful. If not for the black skeleton's warning, Lu Ming would have been in danger. However, after the black skeleton's reminder, Lu Ming had already reacted in advance. In an instant, Lu Ming had already cast the 9-layered crimson gold armor. A layer of crimson gold armor covered his entire body. At the same time, Lu Ming quickly turned around and thrust his spear, aiming at the sword gleam. Buzz! The long spear and the sword light clashed, creating an ear-piercing collision sound, and the force spread in all directions. However, the power of the sword light was shockingly strong. The terrifying sword chi made the long spear vibrate continuously. Then, it said through the long spear and headed for Lu Ming. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming's golden-red armor shook violently and was torn apart. Lu Ming's body was sent flying backward, smashing into a 100-meter-tall boulder. His body was covered with sword wounds and blood was flowing out. Fortunately, the sword gleam said through the spear and the scarlet gold armor one after another. Its power was no longer strong, and Lu Ming only suffered some superficial injuries. The dark-skinned elder was stunned that he did not manage to kill Lu Ming with one strike. He seemed to be very surprised. Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Lu Ming stared at the dark-skinned elder and shouted coldly. This old man's strength was very terrifying. His cultivation was at peak stage 9 true G.O.D. and he controlled king-grade divine power. With Lu Ming's current abilities, if he were to go all out, he could fight with an ordinary 9th stage true G.O.D. However, if he were to encounter a peak 9th stage true G.O.D., he would most likely be no match for him. Moreover, the other party had also mastered king-grade divine power, and his abilities were far above his. Most importantly, Lu Ming did not know this old man. Kill! The dark-skinned elder did not say anything. He shouted coldly and pounced at Lu Ming like lightning. Before he even arrived, streaks of terrifying sword light were already pouring down on Lu Ming. Ice chains! Lu Ming's mind flickered and 8 ice chains flew out like 8 long dragons, entangling the swarthy elder. Buzz! And NBSP whoosh! His opponent's sword light kept striking the ice chains, causing sparks to fly. The ice chains kept shaking, and sword marks appeared on them. However, they still managed to block his attack. At the same time, a terrifying chill spread towards the dark-skinned elder, causing him to shiver. Secret skill, Ice Shackles. This kid has actually cultivated the ice shackles. The dark-skinned elder was shocked. Then, he growled and an even more terrifying divine power burst out from his body. Sword light burst forth continuously, shaking off the ice chains that were binding him and heading toward Lu Ming. The 3 apocalyptic strikes, moon-cutting, die. Lu Ming bellowed and used his strongest move. A crescent-shaped attack was aimed at the swarthy elder. Boom! The two of them collided once again, and a shocking force erupted between them. Retreat, quickly retreat. On the side, the others were shocked and retreated. A few of the weaker ones were killed by the energy from the collision. What terrifying strength! Who are these two? They're even stronger than many domain lords. Many people were shocked. Perhaps only the most terrifying domain lords on the ancient G.O.D. star could match such a fighting power. Brat, die! The dark-skinned elder roared as divine power poured into his body. The sword light expanded and Lu Ming's body trembled. He was sent flying backward and spat out a mouthful of blood. Now is the time. Lu Ming's eyes flickered and another ice chain flew out from his body. This was the last ice chain, and it was also the strongest one. It was the one that had been refined into a mysterious liquid. 2770 Ancient G.O.D. Sea of Flowers. The dark-skinned elder clearly did not expect Lu Ming to have such a move. He was slightly shocked. At the same time, he changed the stance of his sword and slashed at the 9th ice chain. However, when his combat sword struck the 9th ice chain, his expression changed drastically. That was because he felt an extremely terrifying chill coming toward him. It was as if it was going to freeze his blood and even his divine power. Whoosh! The other ice chains trembled and wrapped around the dark-skinned old man, trying to trap him to death. This brat, what a shocking technique, the dark-skinned elder was shocked. He no longer cared about hiding his ident. Tai. At this moment, he exploded with all his strength. Boom! His body erupted like a volcano. His divine power surged and attacked the coldness on his body. At the same time, sword lights burst out and swept away the ice chains. However, even if he used all his strength, it was difficult for him to maintain his disguise. His body and muscles began to change, revealing his original appearance. Lu Zhong! Lu Ming roared, his murderous intent cold. That's right. This dark-skinned elder was Lu Zhong. He had disguised himself and seemed to have cultivated some secret technique. Even his aura was hidden. Lu Ming did not recognize him at all. Lu Ming, you've really surprised me. You've actually forced me to reveal my true form. However, you still have to die. Lu shouted coldly, his eyes extremely cold. I must kill Lu Ming today, he roared in his heart. Lu Ming was too terrifying. He was so young and his cultivation was only at the first stage of true God, but his combat strength was so terrifying that it was hard to imagine. He was only at the first stage of the true God realm, but under his continuous attacks, he was only injured and not dead. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, he would find it hard to believe. If Lu Ming was given a period of time to grow, he would be more powerful. After some time, he was afraid that he would die in Lu Ming's hands. Therefore, he had to kill Lu Ming. Kill! Lu Zhong exploded with all his strength and charged at Lu Ming. Let's go. This time, Lu Ming turned around and left. He could not be bothered to fight with Lu Zhong. With his current strength, he was indeed not Lu Zhong's match. Even if he used all his means, he would still be no match for him. Since he was no match for him, it would be too stupid to continue fighting. This old fellow, I'll kill him later. Lu Ming thought to himself. As long as he got the ancient God flower, his divine body would transform and he would be able to cultivate the battle character formula with 4 times his combat power. Then, he only needed to break through one more stage to reach the second stage of true God. Lu Ming was confident that he could fight Lu Zhong and even kill him. Lu Ming cast the 9 heavenly Kunpeng technique and rushed into the depths of the valley. You want to leave? I will kill you no matter where you go today. He shouted coldly and chased after Lu Ming rapidly. The two of them, one chasing and the other escaping, continued to go deep into the valley. Of course, there were also others who had been rushing into the depths of the valley. And NBSP however, ancient God flowers appeared from time to time along the way, and some people stopped to fight for them. After flying for a while, suddenly, a strong fragrance came from ahead. At the same time, there was an extremely dense energy fluctuation that permeated the air. All of a sudden, Lu Ming's figure could not help but stop. He widened his eyes and looked ahead in a daze. Brat, why aren't you running anymore? Lu Zhong caught up with him quickly, but before he could finish his words, his figure stopped. His eyes were wide open as he looked in front of him in disbelief. It wasn't just the two of them. Some of the other people who had rushed here were also in the same state. He was dumbfounded and tongue-tied, but immediately after that, he felt a deep sense of greed. That was because the front was filled with ancient God flowers. There was a flat piece of land in front of them. There were valleys in 8 directions on this piece of land. The valley that Lu Ming and the others were in was only one of the 8. The 8 valleys converged here. This place was filled with ancient God flowers. There was an uncountable number of ancient God flowers. It was like an ocean of ancient God flowers, swaying and mesmerizing. Gulu. Even Lu Ming could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He had never expected there to be so many ancient God flowers here. 10,000 flowers. 20,000. In short, it was hard to count. Ha ha ha, I'm rich. With so many ancient God flowers, how strong can my God body be? The crowd finally reacted. Many of them rushed toward the ancient God flowers with red eyes. Ancient God flower, Lu Zhong's eyes were filled with greed. He could not care less about killing Lu Ming and pounced on the ancient God flower. His desire for the ancient God flower was stronger than his desire to kill Lu Ming. Buzz! Lu Ming also rushed forward. His divine power condensed into a huge hand and grabbed an ancient God flower. However, he couldn't grab it. Runes began to appear at the flower's roots, forming a circle of light that protected the flower. There's a great formation protecting it. This ancient God flower is actually protected by a great formation. Lu Ming was shocked. He tried to grab another ancient God flower, but the result was the same. When Lu Ming grabbed it, runes emerged from the root of the ancient God flower, forming a circle of light that enveloped the ancient God flower. D-A-M-N-it, what's going on? I actually can't pick it. D-A-M-N-it, this ancient God flower is protected by a formation. 1535 The others also roared. They couldn't pick a flower, not a single one. All the ancient God flowers were protected by the formation, which made everyone's faces extremely gloomy. It was like a gold mountain in front of him, but he couldn't get it. Amazing, amazing. This is a huge array with all the ancient God flowers planted in the eye of the array. There are so many eyes of the array. What is the person who set up the array trying to do? In his sea of consciousness, the black skeleton sat on the painting and muttered to himself. He was looking at everything outside. They're all planted in the eye of the formation. The gaze from inside also focused. Lu Ming naturally heard the black skeleton's words. There was a huge wave in his heart. If that was the case, then this formation was incredible. How many formation eyes were there? The others all tried to pick other ancient God flowers, but without exception, they all failed. No one was able to pick a single ancient God flower. At this moment, more and more people came from behind. When they saw the ocean of ancient God flowers, they were also shocked. Then, they joined the group to pick the flowers. Naturally, no one was able to pick a single flower. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, a terrifying air-piercing sound came from all directions. They were arrows that were like black lightning, shooting toward Lu Ming and the rest. Lu Ming was shocked. A long spear appeared and swept out continuously, deflecting a few arrows. And NBSP, but not everyone reacted so quickly. Screams rang out as many people were shot by arrows and died in the ancient God flower sea. 2770 Ancient GOD's descendant, who is it? Someone shouted and looked in all directions. Then, everyone was shocked. A large group of people had appeared on the cliffs of the valley. These people held large bows in their hands and stood on the cliff wall, surrounding them. Trace Pa. Sirs of ancient GOD's mountain will die. On the northern cliff, there was a young man with a cold expression. He spoke coldly. You guys. Are you a descendant of an ancient God? Someone exclaimed. The others were also shocked. Descendants of ancient GODs. Didn't the descendants of the ancient GODs disappear for countless years? It was said that the descendants of the ancient GODs had been exterminated, leaving only the ancient GODs mountain. Was that all fake? Could it be that the descendants of the ancient GODs had been hiding in the ancient GODs mountain all these years? Since the descendants of the ancient GODs hadn't been destroyed, why hadn't they appeared after so many years? Many people's minds were filled with questions. However, the descendants of the ancient gods obviously wouldn't answer their questions. Kill. On the northern cliff, the young man waved his hand and gave the order. Instantly, the descendants of the ancient gods drew their bows and nocked their arrows. One after another, arrows whistled through the air and shot toward Lu Ming and the others. After all, the ancient god flower was protected by a formation, so they weren't afraid of hurting it. Pft! Pft! People were constantly shot by the arrows and died on the spot, blood flowing all over the ground. Many of these descendants of ancient gods had astonishing strength. Most of them were at the true god realm, and the arrows they shot out had astonishing power. Other than the domain lord level ones, no one else could block it 100%. I don't care if they're the descendants of the ancient gods. Charge forward and kill them. Someone shouted and rushed up the cliff, attacking the descendant of the ancient god. You overestimate yourself. Get down. Get lost. On the cliff wall, some burly figures appeared. Their muscles bulged like horned dragons winding around them, full of power. The strength of these people was very shocking. The moment they attacked, the sky shook violently. Those who charged towards the cliff were all jolted down, even those at the domain lord level. Bang! Lu Ming stomped on the ground and dashed toward the eastern cliff like a long spear. Get down! A middle-aged man charged at Lu Ming and threw a few consecutive punches. The terrifying force of his punches crushed toward Lu Ming. Strong, shockingly strong. Although this middle-aged man was only in the true god realm, he had definitely reached the peak of stage 9 true god realm. His battle strength was not weaker than Lu Zhong's, and he might even be stronger. Lu Ming burst out with all his strength and swept his long spear horizontally. However, the fist force of the other party came crushing down. Lu Ming's body retreated rapidly as if he was being crushed by a mountain and he fell down into the valley. What a powerful strength! Lu Ming felt numb all over. The qi and blood in his body were boiling, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. And NBSP he realized that his opponent's divine power was not too bad, but the strength of his divine body was astonishing. It was much stronger than other cultivators. When they worked together, their combat power would be very strong. A descendant of an ancient god, Lu Ming was certain that the other party was a descendant of an ancient god. According to the legends, when the primeval universe was first created, a group of ancient god spirits were born naturally. These ancient god spirits could be said to be the earliest life forms in the primeval universe. The earliest god spirits were born with terrifying power. In particular, their divine bodies were freakishly strong. The earliest and most ancient gods were ancient gods. The descendants of the ancient gods on the ancient god star, as their name suggested, were said to be the descendants of an ancient god. Although their bloodline was extremely thin, their divine bodies were still stronger than ordinary people. For a moment, no one could rush out of this place. Behind them, there were still people rushing over. Soon, more than 10,000 people who had entered the ancient gods mountain had all gathered here. Almost everyone's here, so let's send them on their way. On the northern cliff, the young man said coldly. Then, he raised his arm high and his voice resounded throughout the entire area, activate the formation and kill all the intruders. Su Mo ordered. Activate the formation. Someone shouted. Buzz. And NBSP whoosh. After that, dense runes appeared on the cliff walls in all directions. The ancient god flowers' roots beneath their feet were also covered in runes. Countless runes interwove with each other, forming a large formation. The area was enveloped by a blood-red light shield. Lu Ming and the rest were all enveloped by this light shield. The descendants of the ancient gods were outside the light barrier. Not good. Many people's expressions changed drastically, and they had a bad feeling in their hearts. Retreat, attack. Someone shouted. He no longer cared about the ancient God flower and rushed toward the valley they had come from. All sorts of attacks were launched at the light shield. However, when these attacks landed on the light shield, they did not cause any ripples. The light shield did not move at all. Attack! Attack! More people joined in the attack, but it was of no use. Hee, these fools still want to escape. Once you enter this formation, you're destined to die here. The young man on the northern cliff laughed coldly. It's starting, said an old man next to the young man coldly. At this moment, some blood-red mist suddenly appeared within the formation's light barrier. Ah! Someone let out a blood-curdling scream as the blood-red mist enveloped him. His body began to corrode violently. His flesh and blood were melting rapidly, and in a few breaths, he had turned into a pool of liquid. The people who witnessed this scene were so frightened that their livers and guts trembled. Ah! Ah! But immediately, more screams were heard. More blood-red mist emerged from the ground. Some people were shrouded in the blood-red mist and followed in the footsteps of the previous person. D-A-M-N-it, D-A-M-N-it, charge out. I don't want to die. And NBSP everyone roared and crazily attacked the light barrier, but it was to no avail. Within the light shield, the blood-red mist grew thicker and thicker. Chi. Lu Ming was enveloped by a blood-red mist. He used all his divine power to resist it, but even if it was the ruler's divine power, there was a sizzling sound of corrosion. If this went on, he would not be able to resist for long. This mist was extremely terrifying. Even divine power would find it hard to resist. Those with strong cultivation and above stage 7 of true God could still resist for the time being. As for those with weak cultivation, they couldn't resist at all. Their protective divine power was corroded, and their bodies were corroded by the blood-red mist. They let out mournful cries and then turned into a pool of blood-red liquid. In the beginning, it was those below stage 3 true God who couldn't withstand it. However, as the blood-red mist became thicker and thicker, slowly, those who were stage 4 true God and above also started to be unable to withstand it. Let me out, let me out. I don't want to die. Spare me. Many people screamed and began to beg for mercy. However, the descendants of the ancient gods had cold expressions and were unmoved. Chapter 2771 Bone Demon Time slowly said, and the fog became thicker and thicker. It even started to block one's line of sight, and the power of the fog also became stronger and stronger. More and more people were melted into liquid. Strangely, the liquid quickly seeped into the ground and seemed to be absorbed by the ancient God flower. The flower became more and more beautiful. More and more people died. More than 10,000 of them had entered, but now, there were less than 5,000 left. People were dying every second. Chi. Lu Ming's body was surrounded by blood-red mist. His divine power was constantly being corroded. Fortunately, Lu Ming had the measure formula and stored a large amount of divine power. He could always maintain his divine power at its peak. However, this was not a solution. No matter how much divine power he stored, there would be a moment when he would run out. What do we do? Lu Ming quickly thought of countermeasures. Amazing, he actually set up such a large array. The descendants of the ancient gods are very ambitious. The black skeleton spoke again. Senior, what did you see? Lu Ming asked hurriedly. Although this formation is profound, with this old man's knowledge, I can naturally see through it with one look. There's an ancient God flower planted in every eye of the formation, the black skeleton continued proudly. It's for something big. These ancient God flowers will fuse with the formation and absorb a large amount of flesh and blood to complete the formation. When that happens, the person who set up the formation will absorb everyone's ancient God flowers and condense the ancient God heart. What a vicious method. Could it be that we were able to come in because someone deliberately tricked us in? Lu Ming muttered. At this moment, he thought of many things. Why did so many maps of ancient God's mountain appear on the ancient God star at the same time? It was obvious that someone had deliberately attracted all the experts on the ancient God star. Then, he would lure them here, kill them, and let the ancient God flower absorb their blood and flesh. After being reminded by the black skeleton, Lu Ming suddenly figured out everything. The reason why they could enter ancient God's mountain was because someone had deliberately arranged it. The person who had arranged all this was the descendant of the ancient Gods. Senior, what is the ancient Gods heart? Lu Ming asked again. Let this old man tell you. These so-called descendants of the ancient Gods actually have extremely thin bloodlines. They can't even be considered descendants of the ancient Gods. Only those who have condensed the ancient Gods heart can be considered true descendants of the ancient Gods. With the ancient Gods heart, one's divine body can keep getting stronger. Their fighting power is amazing. These people can't compare to them. The black skeleton explained. Lu Ming had a sudden realization. However, it's not that easy to condense the ancient Gods heart. I'm afraid it's not enough to do so with just the flesh and blood of you people. The black skeleton said. If it's not enough, then what's the point of luring us here? Lu Ming was puzzled. If my guess is correct, then the person who set this up must have sacrificed a large number of ancient God descendants in order to condense the ancient God heart. TSK, what a ruthless method. The black skeleton clicked its tongue, as if it was quite appreciative. As for Lu Ming, he was greatly shocked. And NBSP he even needed to sacrifice a large number of ancient God descendants and slaughter his own race to help him. This kind of method was really vicious. These descendants of the ancient Gods are probably still in the dark. They don't know that they don't have long to live. The black skeleton chuckled. Senior, how are we going to get out? If this continues, I won't be able to hold on for much longer. Lu Ming said. In just a short while, the blood-red mist here had become shockingly thick, and their vision was getting worse and worse. When they looked up, they could hardly see the figures on the cliff. More and more people died. The remaining people were all extremely frightened. D-A-M-N it, D-A-M-N it. I don't want to die, I don't want to die. Lu Zhong roared in his heart, his face extremely ferocious. He had never expected that he would put himself in such a dangerous situation when he came to hunt down Lu Ming. Although his cultivation was at the peak of stage 9 true God realm and he could still resist for the time being, he would still die if time passed, said. He was extremely frightened. The others were the same. Don't worry, I've already saved you several times. How can I just watch you die here? In the future, I still have things I need you to do. The black skeleton said. How many times have you saved me? Lu Ming was puzzled. Didn't he just remind him before that Lu Zhong wanted to kill him? That was only once. Nonsense. When you were surrounded by the demonic bloodthirsty tree in the forest, who saved you? That fellow, Jingyu, only has a wisp of his imprint left. How could he have the power to save you? The black skeleton berated. Lu Ming had a sudden realization. Back then, when he had just joined the Kongxian sect, he had gone to the forest with Xian Yanqing, Xian Yanjuan, and a few others to train. They had encountered a group of terrifying bloodthirsty demon trees in an abyss, and they were completely no match for them. At that time, Jing Ye's portrait had flown out and scared the bloodthirsty demonic tree away. It turned out that the black skeleton was making a move. Wait a minute, if he referred to Jingyu as that fellow, then he's not Jingyu. Lu Ming's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Previously, he had guessed that the black skeleton was Jing Ye's transformation. Junior thanks Senior for saving me. May I know how to address Senior? Lu Ming said. You can just call me Bone Devil. The black skeleton said indifferently. Senior Bone Demon, how can I escape? Lu Ming asked. The mist from this formation is powerful, but it'll transfer some of my power to you, enough to block the mist from the outside. However, let me tell you, I don't have much power left, so don't expect me to help you if you encounter danger in the future. Bone warned. Many thanks, Senior. Lu Ming immediately expressed his gratitude. Let's talk about it after we get through the current difficulties. It's not too late to talk about the future. At this moment, the Bone Demon's body glowed and a jet-black energy gushed into Lu Ming's body. A layer of black light immediately emerged on the surface of Lu Ming's body, completely blocking the blood-red mist outside and isolating him from the world. Lu Ming's pressure was greatly reduced and he was relieved. However, this scene was seen by Lu Zhong, who was not far away. This kid can actually completely isolate the blood-red mist. Treasure, this kid must have a treasure on him. I'm going to take it. Lu Xian roared in his heart, his eyes revealing a greedy look. He thought that Lu Ming had some kind of treasure on him that could resist the blood-colored mist outside. If he could seize it, he might be able to live. He rushed toward Lu Ming rapidly. This old fellow, Lu Ming naturally noticed Lu Zhong as well. A strong murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Kid, hand over your treasures. He lowered his voice in fear of being heard by others and competing with him. Hand over your sister. Die. Lu Ming shouted and attacked with all his might. All looking for death, Lu Ming cast the second move of the 3 apocalyptic strikes, Cutting Moon, and attacked Lu Zhong with all his might. Lu Zhong also slashed out a sword light, which collided with Lu Ming. Boom! The two of them collided. However, this time, it was Lu Zhong who retreated instead of Lu Ming. Lu Zhong's body retreated and trembled. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. You! How can you use your full power? Lu Zhong roared in shock. In such an environment, he had to divert most of his power to resist the blood-red mist outside, so his combat power was naturally greatly reduced. He had thought that even if Lu Ming had a treasure to resist the blood-colored mist, it would consume a large amount of divine power to activate it and his own strength would be weakened. He had thought that it would not be a problem to take Lu Ming down. However, in the collision just now, Lu Ming was in his peak state. His combat strength was at its peak. Old man, go to hell. Lu Ming said coldly and charged towards Lu Zhong. This time, he used the same move, Moon Slash. At the same time, the 9 ice chains also wrapped around Lu Zhong. I don't believe it. He bellowed in the music and slashed a sword light at Lu Ming. However, after their attacks collided, Lu Zhong's sword light collapsed instantly. He was sent flying by Lu Ming and coughed up a large amount of blood. The most terrifying thing was that his protective divine energy was almost shattered by Lu Ming. The blood-colored mist took advantage of the situation and broke through Lu Zhong's defense, touching his body. Chi. White smoke rose from Lu Zhong's body. A large piece of flesh was corroded. Lu Zhong was so scared that he turned around and ran. He was afraid. He no longer had the thought of killing Lu Ming. He only wanted to run away as soon as possible and get as far away from Lu Ming as possible. However, how could Lu Ming let him escape? The 9 ice chains wrapped around Lu Zhong. Although Lu Zhong resisted with all his might, he had to fight against the blood-colored mist and could not use much strength. He was bound by the chains and the terrifying chill was about to freeze him. Damn it, Lu Ming. Even if I die, I won't let you have an easy time. Men, this kid has a treasure that can block the blood-colored mist's attack. As long as we get this treasure, we won't die. Men, he roared in joy, his voice spreading far and wide. Instantly, many people heard it. What? Someone is controlling a treasure that can resist the blood-red mist. I must get it, this treasure is mine. Anyone who blocks me will die. Everyone was in a frenzy and they charged toward Lu Ming and the rest. The rest of the people understood that if this continued, they would die sooner or later. However, if they had a treasure that could resist the blood-colored mist, they would be able to survive. It would be strange if they didn't go crazy. You think you can kill me with this method? Since you're so stupid, I'll send you on your way. Lu Ming's cold voice was heard and he thrust his spear at Le Zhong. Le Zhong was bound by the ice chains and couldn't dodge at all. He was pierced by the spear and died. He waved his hand and kept Le Zhong's storage ring. At that moment, the others rushed over. They realized that there was a layer of black light on Lu Ming's body that could separate the blood-colored mist. Their eyes turned red instantly. It can really block out the blood-colored mist. Kid, hand over your treasure. Everyone had a greedy look on their faces as they charged toward Lu Ming. Humph, since you're looking for death, I'll send you on your way in advance. Lu Ming said coldly. The 9 ice chains flew out as Lu Ming cast the 3 apocalyptic strikes. After a single shot, 2 experts were killed. Those who were still alive were undoubtedly experts. Almost all of them were Domain Lord level characters. However, these people were not Lu Ming's match even at their peak. Now that they had to divert a large portion of their energy to fight against the blood-colored mist, they were no match for Lu Ming. They were completely crushed. Kill. Lu Ming's figure moved unhindered, the spear's gleam surged and the experts were killed one by one. At the same time, the 9 ice chains danced and wrapped around the experts, sealing them in ice. Saker. It was a complete Saker. There had been more than 100 people who had charged at Lu Ming earlier. However, Lu Ming had killed them all in an instant. Not a single one was left. The storage rings of these people had also entered Lu Ming's pocket. These people were all region masters and they were definitely wealthy. Lu Ming had made a fortune. On the cliff, the descendants of the ancient gods were waiting quietly. At this moment, the fog was already very thick, and they couldn't see what was happening below. However, they still heard the sound just now. There's a treasure that can withstand the attack of the formation. Some people's gazes moved. Impossible. Even a high-quality divine artifact can't stop it. At most, it can buy us some time. If we're still going to die after a while, well, just wait quietly. The young man on the northern side of the cliff sneered. At the bottom of the cliff, Lu Ming had killed more than 100 masters. In an instant, he was the only one left in the area. The place was deathly silent. He realized that the ancient god flowers underground had become more beautiful. Under the corrosion of the blood-colored mist, the blood and flesh of the experts who were killed by Lu Ming turned into liquid and were absorbed by the earth. What a vicious evil formation. Senior Bone Demon, this fog is blocked, but how do I get out? Lu Ming asked again. It's easy to get out. You can do it on your own. Bone said. By myself? Lu Ming was puzzled. The light shield formed by the formation was extremely strong. So many experts had attacked it together, but they could not break it at all. How could he break it? Right. You have to rely on yourself. One of the chains of ice that you train in is shockingly powerful. It's filled with a terrifyingly cold aura that's enough to break through this formation's barrier of light. Bone said. The frozen shackles. Could it be the 9th frozen shackle? Lu Ming had an idea and decided to give it a try. Lu Ming's eyes darted around for a while before he headed north. When he arrived at the cliff in the north, he restrained his aura and flew upwards. And NBSP, the youth and the other ancient God descendants on the cliff didn't notice at all. When Lu Ming was close to the cliff, he suddenly cast the ice chain. The ninth ice chain was like a white lightning bolt, rushing toward the light shield. Pfft! When the ninth ice chain touched the light shield, to Lu Ming's surprise, the light shield was pierced through. The ice chains quickly wrapped around the young man. The ice chains quickly wrapped around the young man. It was easy to tell that the young man had a high status among the descendants of the ancient gods. As long as they took the young man as a hostage, Lu Ming might be able to escape and get many ancient god flowers. The descendants of the ancient gods were all very relaxed. They didn't think that anyone would be able to break out of the array. When they realized that the ice chains were going to wrap around the youth, it was already too late. "Be careful," someone shouted to remind him and rushed towards the ice chains. However, it was all over. The ice chains wrapped around the young man and pulled him into the formation. Ruthless pulling the young man into the formation, Lu Ming's body emitted a layer of black light that enveloped the young man and blocked the blood-colored mist outside. He still wanted to take the young man as a hostage, so he naturally couldn't let him die. Ah! The young man screamed in fear. When he realized that nothing had happened, he became bold and shouted, "Brat, quickly let me go, quickly let me go, let you go. Tell your people to remove the formation and let me go. Also, give me 100 ancient god flowers, no, 500 ancient god flowers." Lu Ming said coldly. 500 ancient god flowers? Impossible. The young man roared. What do you guys say? Do you want him to die, or hand over the ancient god flower and let me go? Lu Ming could not be bothered with the young man. Instead, he looked at the descendants of the ancient gods on the cliff. The descendants of the ancient gods all had ugly expressions. "Kid, do you know who this person is? He's the son of the Grand Elder, a descendant of an ancient god. If anything happens to him, you'll have to die as well." An old man said coldly. "I don't care whose son he is. If he doesn't hand over the ancient god flower, they'll throw him out and let him die in this formation." Lu Ming said coldly. He didn't care whose son this young man was. The higher his status was, the better. That way, he could take the ancient god flower and leave. You, and NBSP, the old man and the other ancient god descendants all had unsightly expressions. These people looked at each other, not knowing what to do. "Save me, save me!" The young man roared. "We have to report this to the Grand Elder or the Patriarch before we can make a decision." The old man said. "There's no need to report." At this moment, a cold voice was heard. Then, a tall old man with white hair and beard walked over. Seeing the old man, the young man was overjoyed and shouted, "Father, Father, save me! We pay our respects to First Elder," and NBSP, the other ancient god descendants all saluted. It turned out that this man was the great elder of the ancient god clan. This person's cultivation is very high. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat when he saw the first elder of the ancient god. The pressure he felt from this man was shocking. It made Lu Ming feel as if he was facing the outer sect elders of the Kongxian sect. After all, the outer sect elders of the Kongxian sect were all at the Sky God realm. This person was very likely to be a heavenly God existence. The first elder of the ancient God clan looked gloomy. He looked at Lu Ming and said, "Quickly release my son, and I'll let you go if I agree." Hearing this, the young man was ecstatic. "Give me the 500 ancient God flowers, then remove the formation and let me leave." "I'll let her go then," Lu Ming said. "Let him go first." The head elder of the ancient God clan shouted coldly. "Do you think it's possible to let him go first?" Lu Ming sneered. He did not trust the other party. "Kid, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." The first elder of the ancient God clan looked extremely gloomy and was filled with killing intent. "Hand over the ancient God flower, remove the formation, and let me go. I'll naturally let you go. The conditions are simple," Lu Ming said coldly. The first elder's expression changed. "In the end," he said determinedly, "the secret of this place must not be leaked out. Wei, you can go in peace. I will avenge you." "What?" Upon hearing this, Lu Ming was shocked. The other party didn't care about the life and death of the young man, not even his own son. "No, no, father, no, save me," the young man roared madly. "Continue to activate the formation. Also, send out experts to block this man's path of retreat and prevent him from rushing out. This time, everyone who came in must die. Not a single one can be left alive." The Grand Elder of the ancient God clan gave the order. His eyes were extremely cold. "Yes." The other ancient God descendants dashed toward the valley where Lu Ming and the others came from to prevent Lu Ming from escaping. "Damn it!" Lu Ming roared in his heart. His eyes were cold as he stared at the first elder of the ancient God. "If you don't even care about your own son, then I'll fulfill your wish." With a single thought, the ice chains wrapped around the young man and sent him into the blood-colored mist. Chi. Immediately, the sound of corrosion came from the young man's body, and he screamed in pain. "Wei, don't worry. I'll avenge you. I'll burn this kid's bones and scatter his ashes. I'll make him die a miserable death." The Grand Elder's voice was extremely cold. This old fellow. Could it be that he's the one who set up this great formation? Lu Ming could not help but think. He could not help but suspect that it was the great elder of the ancient God clan who had set up this formation to condense the heart of the ancient God himself. That was why he did not care about his own son. "You don't even care about your own son. I'll fulfill your wish then." Lu Ming threw the young man into the valley. The young man screamed and soon lost his breath. The first elder of the ancient God was full of murderous intent. If it were not for the fact that he was extremely wary of the blood-colored mist in the formation, he would have charged in and killed Lu Ming with a single slap. "Activate the formation at full power. Let's see how long he can last," the Grand Elder of the ancient God clan ordered. Buzz! Instantly, the runes in the surroundings shone with an even more dazzling light, and the blood-colored mist in the array became even thicker. Lu Ming did not stop. In a flash, he disappeared into the fog and rushed toward the canyon that he had come from. However, when he arrived, he found that the outside of the formation was surrounded by experts of the ancient God descendants. "What a miscalculation," Lu Ming muttered. This time, he had really miscalculated. He had not expected the first elder of the ancient God clan to be so cruel that he would not even care about the life and death of his own son. Initially, he had planned to take the young man as a hostage and exchange him for some ancient God flowers before leaving. Otherwise, Lu Ming might have succeeded if he had sneaked out of the valley from the beginning. But now, it was too late. The other side was surrounded by a large number of experts. If he were to attack from here, he would definitely die. "I can only change my direction." Lu Ming dodged into the mist again and rushed toward another valley. There were a total of 8 valleys here, and no one knew where the other 7 led to. Lu Ming randomly picked one. When he was close to the array, the 9th ice chain flew out and spun continuously with the head of the chain as the core. Bang! The light shield of the formation was immediately broken and Lu Ming rushed out. Naturally, there were descendants of ancient gods guarding this place. Lu Ming was discovered the moment he rushed out. "This brat is here, stop him. Kill." The descendants of the ancient gods charged toward Lu Ming. However, there were not many people here because most of them had gone to the valley that Lu Ming and the rest had entered from. There were only 7 or 8 people here. The 3 apocalyptic strikes, moon cutting. Lu Ming used all his strength to cast the 3 apocalyptic strikes. A crescent-shaped attack was launched. Boom! Boom! Among these 7 to 8 descendants of ancient gods, the strongest was only at the 8th stage true god realm. Lu Ming broke through their defense in an instant and rushed out. The third lady of the ancient god. As soon as Lu Ming broke out of the encirclement, he ran wildly into the depths of the valley. "This kid is here. Don't let him run away. Chase him." The descendant of the ancient god roared and chased after Lu Ming. "Chase him, we must catch this brat. This old man will burn his bones and scatter his ashes." The first elder of the ancient god roared and dashed toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming cast the 9 heavenly Kuan Peng technique and flew at full speed. He was extremely fast and soon, he was out of the valley. Behind this valley was a boundless region of hills and mountains. In some places, one could even see palaces and houses. It was obvious that this was the residence of the descendants of the ancient gods, where the real ancient gods mountain was. But now, Lu Ming could not care about that. He randomly chose a direction and rushed over. Behind him, the descendant of the ancient god was in hot pursuit. Lu Ming pushed the 9 heavenly Kuan Peng technique to its limits. His speed was astonishing, and he leaped across the void like a Kuan Peng. Not long after, a mountain peak appeared in front of Lu Ming. The environment on the mountain peak was very good. There was a small lake and a house was built beside the lake. At that moment, Lu Ming saw a young lady by the lake cultivating her swordsmanship. The sword technique was agile, like a silver snake dancing in the air. One could tell at a glance that it was extraordinary. And NBSP, but at this moment, the ancient god descendants in pursuit had a major change in expression. "Not good, the third young lattice residence is in front." A descendant of an ancient god exclaimed. "Idiot, don't shout," another ancient god descendant shouted in anger. What if Lu Ming heard her shouting so loudly? Unfortunately, it was too late. Lu Ming had already heard the person scream. "Third miss. He seems to be a big shot." Lu Ming's eyes turned cold and he rushed toward the young woman. The young woman had already seen Lu Ming. She was slightly stunned and then shouted, "Who are you? How dare you barge into my cultivation place?" Lu Ming could not be bothered to waste his breath on her. He condensed a large hand with divine power and grabbed the young woman. "You, how dare you?" The young woman was shocked. The combat sword in her hand slashed toward Lu Ming. This young lady had a cultivation base of peak 9th level void god realm and the divine power she controlled was very powerful. However, such a cultivation base could not even withstand a single blow from Lu Ming. As the huge hand pressed down, the sword gleam collapsed and the young woman was caught in Lu Ming's hand. "Third young miss, quickly release third miss." And NBSP behind them, the descendants of the ancient gods rushed over, and when they saw that the young woman had been captured, their expressions changed and they began to roar. "Stop right there." Lu Ming condensed a large hand with divine power, grabbed the young woman, and shouted coldly. The descendants of the ancient gods all stopped in the distance, not daring to get close. It was obvious that the young woman's ident. Tai made them extremely afraid. "You. Who was it? Quickly release me." The young woman cried out and struggled with all her might. However, with her cultivation, how could she possibly break free? Third miss, this person is an outsider and has ill intentions. A descendant of an ancient God shouted. You're an outsider. Let me go, you shameless outsider. The young woman struggled and cursed. However, Lu Ming was unmoved. He retreated rapidly with the young woman. Shwa shwa shwa. Behind them, many figures flew over like lightning. The one in the lead was the first elder of the ancient God clan. First elder, save me, the young woman cried for help. Brat, let him go. The first elder of the ancient God clan bellowed. His terrifying aura pressed toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming's body trembled and he retreated. He almost spat out blood. Terrifying. The great elder of the ancient God clan was extremely powerful. He was definitely at the divine realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to emit such a terrifying pressure. Back off, or I'll kill her, die. Lu Ming shouted, exuding cold killing intent. The spear in his hand was aimed at the young woman's forehead. The first elder and the other members of the ancient God clan were shocked. Brat, you dare. The first elder of the ancient God clan roared. What's there to be afraid? Anyway, you won't let me go now. At most, we'll die together. It's worth it to have such a beauty to accompany me, hee hee. Lu Ming sneered. The great elder of the ancient God clan looked terrible. However, the young woman sighed. Tai was not to be underestimated. She was the third daughter of the ancient God clan leader, and she was also a daughter that the ancient God clan leader loved dearly. He did not dare to act rashly. He could ignore the life and death of his son, but he couldn't ignore the life and death of the third daughter of the leader of the ancient God clan. Otherwise, he would be in serious trouble. Kid, let me tell you. Even if you catch the third lady, you can't leave ancient God's mountain. The ancient God clan will not compromise. The head elder of the ancient God clan said coldly. His face was determined. Lu Ming frowned. The great elder of the ancient God clan seemed to be determined not to let him leave the ancient God's mountain. He didn't even care about his son's life, as if he was afraid that the secret of the ancient God's mountain would be leaked. If Lu Ming were to use the same tactic and use the young woman as a hostage to force the other party to let him go, the other party might want to fight to the death again. If that was the case, he would definitely die in such an environment. The only thing he could do now was to take a step back. Who said him leaving the ancient God's mountain? I told you not to chase after me. Stop here. Do you understand? Lu Ming said coldly. He led the young woman and retreated slowly. As expected, the great elder of the descendants of the ancient God did not pursue him. He watched as Lu Ming slowly walked away. First elder, are we not going to chase? Someone asked. Let this kid leave first. This is ancient God's mountain and he can't get out. Let's stabilize him first so that third lady doesn't get hurt. Also, inform the patriarch of this place immediately so that he can send more powerful warriors to kill that kid. The grand elder instructed. Yes. The other descendants of the ancient Gods started to move. Lu Ming flew with the young woman. He heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that no one was chasing after them. Lu Ming specially flew towards a remote area. After flying for a while, Lu Ming found a hidden canyon and flew in. You outsider, let me go, or my father won't let you off. The young woman called out. Is your father the clan leader of the descendants of the ancient Gods? Lu Ming asked. Not bad. Now that you're afraid, let me go, you despicable and shameless outsider. The young woman glared at Lu Ming. As expected, she is the daughter of the clan leader, a descendant of an ancient God. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. No wonder the descendants of the ancient gods were so afraid. He sighed at his good luck to have met the daughter of the clan leader of the descendants of ancient gods. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape. Stay here. Otherwise, it'll make you suffer. Lu Ming cast a cold glance at the young woman. Humph, if you want to kill me, then kill me. You're a vicious person, I'm not afraid of you. The young woman widened her eyes and glared at Lu Ming, as if she was not afraid of death. Chapter 2775 Secret. Lu Ming was somewhat speechless. Vicious? How am I vicious? You outsiders are all vicious people. You don't have good intentions in coming to ancient gods mountain. The young woman said coldly. Hee, we don't have good intentions. We're only here to pick some ancient god flowers. How can you say that we're vicious? You released the map of the ancient gods mountain to lure us here, then trapped us with the formation and fed our flesh and blood to the ancient god flower. Who is more vicious, you or us? Lu Ming said coldly. You. You're talking nonsense, you're talking nonsense. We, the descendants of the ancient gods, would never do such a cruel thing. Don't you slander us. The young woman gritted her teeth and looked at Lu Ming with a look of hatred. Could it be that this woman really doesn't know? Lu Ming's heart stirred. Stop pretending. Someone from your ancient god clan has set up a formation with the ancient god flower as the eye of the formation to absorb the flesh and blood of a large number of experts in order to condense the heart of the ancient god. Don't think I don't know about it. Also, the flesh and blood of outsiders like us won't be enough. When the time comes, I'm afraid most of the descendants of the ancient gods will be buried with you and sacrificed. Lu Ming said coldly. As he spoke, his eyes were fixed on the young woman, waiting for her reaction. The woman's face turned pale. She then glared at Lu Ming and shouted, You're talking nonsense. This is impossible. That formation was set up by my father. My father would never do such a thing. Don't you dare slander him. So that formation was laid down by the clan leader of the ancient god descendants. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat and he sneered. It's not like you can't believe it. But it's the truth. We obtained hundreds of maps of ancient gods mountain out of thin air. We found ancient gods mountain through the maps, but in the end, everyone died. I was the only one who was lucky enough to survive. Next, the descendants of ancient gods will die. Shut up. You're talking nonsense. Don't talk nonsense. I won't allow you to slander my father. The young woman shouted, but her eyes were no longer as firm as before. Instead, she looked suspicious. He is not talking nonsense. At this moment, an old voice came from outside the valley. The voice had come from far away, but by the time it had sounded, it was already very close. An expert, a top expert had come. Lu Ming was shocked. With a thought, the ice chain flew out and wrapped around the young woman, trying to control her. However, the moment the ice chains flew out, a terrifying pressure came from the sky. The pressure was heavier than a mountain. The 9 ice chains were trapped by the pressure. At the same time, the pressure pressed on Lu Ming's body, forcing him to retreat. At this moment, an old man holding a dragon-headed walking stick appeared in the valley. The wrinkles on his face were like mountains, making him look very old. Not good, it's a 3rd-level heavenly deity. We're finished this time, Bone shouted. Grandpa Gubo. Seeing the old man, the young woman smiled and ran to him. Xing, are you all right? The old man looked at the young woman dotingly. This young woman's name was Gu Xing. I'm fine, Grandpa Gubo. This outsider actually slandered father just now. That's right, Grandpa Gubo, why did you say he was right just now? Gu Xing was rather happy, but when she said the last sentence, she revealed a trace of suspicion. I mean, what this little guy said just now is very likely to be true. Sigh. Gu Bo sighed. Really? How is this possible? Impossible, this is impossible. Gu Xing's eyes revealed a look of disbelief as she shook her head. Lu Ming said that his father had set up a formation to nourish the ancient G.O.D. flower with the flesh and blood of outsiders. Later on, he would also use the flesh and blood of the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.s to nourish the ancient G.O.D. flower. How was that possible? She could not believe it. Sigh, at first, I didn't believe it either. But ever since the clan leader set up that great formation and gave the order to seal the mountain, I began to doubt it. All these years, I've been investigating in secret, and I've finally found out that your father's obsession is too deep. He wholeheartedly wants the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.s to walk on the path to glory, and he wholeheartedly wants to condense the ancient G.O.D. heart. For this, he will pay any price. Gu Bo sighed, his voice filled with helplessness. How could this be? How did this happen? Gu Xing was completely at a loss. This blow to her was really too big. If Gu Bo had not told her this news, she would never have believed it. However, Gu Bo would not lie to her. Little guy, you can see the function of that great formation with one look and deduce so many things. It's not simple. Gu Bo looked at Lu Ming, his face full of surprise. And NBSP, I was just randomly guessing. Senior, I have no ill intentions toward the ancient G.O.D. descendants. I just want to take a few ancient G.O.D. flowers. Could Senior allow me to leave? The ancient G.O.D. emperor asked. Lu Ming explained. I'm afraid it'll be very difficult for you to leave now. The patriarch has already given the order that all the exits have been sealed. Even if this old man wants to help you, I can't. Gu Bo said. All the exits have been sealed. Lu Ming frowned. This was troublesome. No, I have to stop my father. I have to stop him. Gu Xing called out in a daze, and was about to rush out of the valley. Gu Bo waved his hand, and a ray of Shen power enveloped Gu Xing, blocking her. Grandpa Gu Bo, why are you stopping me? I want to see my father, I want to stop him. Gu Xing shouted. Xing, the patriarch's obsession is too deep, and the matter is about to reach the final step. If you go over, you won't be able to stop him. Instead, you'll be put under house arrest. Gu Bo said. Then what should we do? Was he just going to let it go? If it's true, then how many of our clansmen will die? Hell be a sinner through the ages. Gu Xing shouted. Of course he won't. If I'm not wrong, the clan leader will definitely choose to take action at the ancestral worship ceremony in a month. At that time, I'm afraid 90% of the clan will be sacrificed. Gu Bo said. Gu Xing quivered. That's right, the ancestral worship ceremony would be held in a month's time. At that time, all the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.s would gather at the place where the 8 valleys converge to worship their ancestors. That would be the best time to strike. During this period of time, I will secretly gather some people. When your father makes his move, we will stop him. After Gu Bo said this, he looked at Lu Ming and said, Little friend, why don't you stay and help this old man? Only by stopping the patriarch's evil actions can you leave. At that time, this old man will give you some ancient G.O.D. flowers. What do you think? All right then. Lu Ming nodded. In the current situation, he could only choose to agree. What else could he do if he didn't agree? Chapter 2776, It begins, good. Now, you two will leave with this old man. Once we arrive at my residence, he'll spread the news that I've already saved Xing, her. Little brother, you should change your appearance so that this old man can take you away. Gu Bo said. Lu Ming nodded. At this moment, he could only choose to believe in Gu Bo. Moreover, with Gu Ba's cultivation, there was no need to lie to him. He didn't have a hostage in his hands right now, so if Gu Bo wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as turning his hand. Immediately, Lu Ming changed his appearance, changed his clothes, and flew out with Gu Bo. Not long after, a group of people flew over from the front. When they saw Gu Xing, they were instantly overjoyed. "Third Miss, you're all right." Someone revealed a look of joy. "Don't worry, I've already saved Third Miss." Gu Bo said. "Senior Elder, I wonder how that foreign kid is doing." Someone asked. "That brat has already been killed by me. There's no corpse left. You can rest assured." Gu Bo said. "I see." The group of people nodded. However, when they glanced at Lu Ming, they still had a suspicious look on their faces. However, in front of Gu Bo, they didn't dare to be impudent. Gu Bo was one of the few remaining elders in the clan of the ancient G.O.D.S descendants, and his seniority was frighteningly high. This group of people cast a glance at Lu Ming and left one after another. Lu Ming followed Gu Bo and arrived at Gu Ba's residence without any danger. For the rest of the time, Lu Ming stayed here while Gu Bo secretly contacted the experts he could trust. After a month, he would stop the clan leader of the descendants of the ancient G.O.D. As for Gu Xing, she was obviously distracted. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed. That day was the day the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S would worship their ancestors. The location was the gathering of the 8 valleys, the place where ancient G.O.D flowers were planted. That place was the holy land of the ancient G.O.D clan. The gathering place of the 8 valleys was filled with people. Most of the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S had come and gathered at the gathering place of the 8 valleys. On the northern cliff, there was a group of people standing. The leader was a middle-aged burly man with a square face and a dignified expression. He was the clan leader of the ancient G.O.D descendants, Gu Xing's father, Gu Xiong. Beside Gu Xiong stood the Grand Elder and some other elders. "Let's start the ancestral worship." Gu Xiong's voice reverberated across the entire place. "Welcome to the ancestral altar." All the ancient G.O.D clansmen shouted in unison. Then, 8 burly men carrying an altar flew over. With every step they took, there would be a fled sound in the void, as if they were carrying a divine mountain while walking. This altar was ancient and filled with the feeling of time. It was the ancestral altar of the ancient G.O.D. When the 8 brawny men carried the altar to the place where the 8 valleys gathered, the altar emitted a brilliant light. Runes appeared on it, then flew into the void and began to expand. Buzz! Gu Xiong's body flickered as he flew to the top of the altar and sat down cross-legged. All the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S bowed to Gu Xiong. "Today, after today, I will rise again. The ancient G.O.D clan will rise again. I hope you don't blame me. Your sacrifice is worth it." Looking at the tens of thousands of descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S, Gu Xiong roared in his heart. He had been preparing for this day for far too long. Today, he was going to condense the ancient G.O.D.S heart and regain the glory of the ancient G.O.D. Second Elder, Fifth Elder, you can all go down. At this moment, Gu Xiong looked at some people on the cliff. Many of them were elders of the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. "We're going down too." The elders were stunned. According to the usual practice, the elders could just stand on the cliff and did not need to go down. "Not bad, you may all leave." Gu Xiong spoke again with a more serious tone. Although the elders were suspicious, they didn't disobey. They all flew to the bottom of the valley and stood in the sea of ancient G.O.D flowers. Of course, not all of the elders flew down. For example, the first elder and a few others stood there without moving. It was obvious that these people had known about Gu Xiong's plan long ago, and they were also Gu Xiong's supporters. Where's Xing He? Didn't she come? Gu Xiong looked at the first elder. Third miss didn't come. She has been staying with Elder Gu Bo all this time. The great elder reported. Oh, really? That's good. Gu Xiong's eyes flickered with an indescribable light. Actually, at this moment, Gu Xing had already arrived nearby. Gu Xing, Lu Ming, Gu Bo, and some of the people that Gu Bo had contacted, came to a secret place in the distance, watching this side from afar. Father, I hope you won't do anything stupid. Gu Xing's hands were tightly clenched together. She was extremely nervous. At this moment, Gu Xiong started his speech. We, the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S., are the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. N.O. blood flows in our bodies. We should have been the dominators and royal families of the primeval universe. But now, we're hiding on a small star. My fellow clansmen, are you willing to accept this? Gu Xiong's voice sounded. I'm unwilling. I'm unwilling. The descendant of the ancient G.O.D. clan shouted. His voice was so loud that it could topple mountains and overturn the seas. I'm also unwilling. Gu Xiong roared, I once swore that I would lead our race to glory in this life. For that, I would do anything, including my own life. What about you? Are you willing to sacrifice your lives for the glory of our race? I'm willing. I'm willing to sacrifice my life. The descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. roared. Alright, since you're all willing, then today will be the day you sacrifice yourselves to bring success to our tribe. Activate the formation. Gu Xiong shouted. His eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Activate the formation. The Grand Elder and the others also shouted. And NBSP the walls and the ground of the 8 valleys congregated in endless runes, creating a light barrier that completely enveloped all the ancient G.O.D. descendants. This is... What's going on? Chief, what are you doing? Many descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. felt that something was wrong and immediately shouted. But the next moment, a scream was heard. And NBSP a ball of blood-colored mist appeared and covered one of the ancient G.O.D. descendants. This descendant's cultivation wasn't high, so his flesh and blood were quickly corroded and turned into a pool of blood. Ah, what's going on? Chief, what are you doing? Many people shouted. Father, in the distance, Gu Xing suddenly collapsed onto the ground, as if she had been drained of all her strength. Her eyes were filled with disappointment. As expected, as expected. Rush out and stop them. Remember, close the formation first. Gu Bo roared and charged out first. The others followed Gu Bo and flew out. Lu Ming mixed in with the crowd and flew out together. Your sacrifice will bring glory to our clan. Rest in peace. Gu Xiong's cold voice sounded. Ah, animal, you animal. You want to sacrifice us for your own benefit. Some elders finally saw through Gu Xiong's evil intentions and immediately shouted out. Chapter 2777 Stopping, Charge Out. And NBSP all the ancient G.O.D. descendants were furious, and they all charged at the light shields and attacked them. However, when all the attacks hit the light shield did not move at all. It could not be broken at all. Miserable shrieks rang out continuously as the blood-colored mist in the array increased. Some of the weaker cultivators couldn't withstand it at all. Once they were enveloped by the blood-colored mist, only death awaited them. At this time, Gu Bo and the others had already arrived. Gu Xiong, you have the ambition of a wolf. You want to condense the heart of the ancient G.O.D. by yourself, but you have to sacrifice so many of your clansmen. I will not allow you to do so. Gu Bo roared. It's Elder Gu Bo, its elder Gu Bo, the descendants of the ancient Gods that were trapped in the formation were overjoyed when they saw Gu Bo. Gu Xiong looked at Gu Bo, his eyes filled with cold killing intent. Leave Gu Xiong to me. You guys go and close the formation. Gu Bo shouted at the others, and then pounced towards Gu Xiong. You think you can stop me? Naive, kill. Gu Xiong shouted as he flew up into the sky and threw a punch towards Gu Bo. Gu Bo didn't dodge at all, and also exploded with an attack, blasting out a terrifying move. Boom! The two of them collided with an earth-shattering boom, but the result was a tie. As the clan leader of the ancient Gods descendants, Gu Xiong's strength was also very shocking. He had reached the third level of the celestial deity realm. The two of them fought intensely, and it was difficult to determine the winner. Lu Ming and the rest rushed to the base of the array on the cliff. Don't even think about closing the formation. Stop them. If they resist, kill them without mercy. The Great Elder gave the order and soared into the sky, erupting with a terrifying attack. Head Elder had first-level celestial deity cultivation and was extremely terrifying too. However, there was also a first-level heavenly God on Lu Ming's side who charged at First Elder. The two sides were engaged in an intense battle. Lu Ming and the group were fighting with the others. Ice chains. At this moment, Lu Ming did not care about hiding his ident. Tai. He used all his strength. 9 ice chains flew out and swept toward the descendants of the ancient Gods. It's you, an outsider. The First Elder recognized Lu Ming as soon as he attacked. He let out an angry roar, his eyes filled with ferocity. It was because of Lu Ming that he had to watch his son die in the formation. He could not wait to burn Lu Ming's bones and scatter his ashes. Kill this brat, the Great Elder roared. Leave this kid to me. An old man charged at Lu Ming, the saber in his hand slashing out rays of saber radiance. Clang! Clang! The saber ray struck the ice chains and sent them flying back. This elder was an elder of the descendants of the ancient Gods. His cultivation had reached the peak of true God and he was astonishingly powerful. He was not any weaker than Lu Zhong back then. Lu Ming was immediately blocked and he retreated. The two sides were locked in battle. Father, stop. At this moment, Gu Xing also flew over and shouted. Xing, go to the side. This is none of your business. Gu Xiong shouted. Father, let's stop. Those people are all from our clan. There aren't many people in our clan of ancient God descendants to begin with. If this continues, I'm afraid we'll be exterminated. Gu Xing shouted. Nonsense. As long as I can condense the ancient Gods heart, I will definitely lead my clan to glory. Their sacrifices will be worth it. Gu Xiong roared, his eyes filled with madness. Father, Gu Xing's eyes were filled with disappointment. She gritted her teeth and rushed towards Gu Xiong. Xing, you. Seeing Gu Xing rushing over, Gu Xiong was slightly startled. With such a shock, his attack speed was slightly slower, allowing Gu Bo to seize the opportunity to punch Gu Xiong's shoulder. Gu Xiong was forced back and coughed out blood. Gu Xiong, close the grand formation now. Don't be so stubborn, kill. Gu Bo shouted. At this moment, the descendants of the ancient Gods were dying in the formation. His heart was bleeding. Impossible. Gu Xiong roared. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Gu Bo charged towards Gu Xiong. Humph, Gu Bo, do you think I don't know that you'll stop me today? You think you're being secretive, but I've already seen through your plan. Come out. Gu Xiong sneered as he waved his hand. Buzz. Buzz. Suddenly, 2 streaks of light shot out from not far away, flying towards Gu Bo at an astonishing speed. The two of them were both old people. One was an old man, and the other was an old woman. They both looked as old as Gu Bo, Gu Shang, Gu Ling. It's you, Gu Bo was shocked. Because these two were existences that were as famous as him. They were the other two elders of the descendants of the ancient Gods. There were a total of 3 elders among the descendants of the ancient Gods, which were Gu Bo, Gu Shang, and Gu Ling. Kill. Gu Shang and Gu Ling immediately charged towards Gu Bo. The cultivation of the two of them was at the 3rd level heavenly deity realm, and their combat strength was not any weaker than Gu Bo's. With the two of them joining forces, Gu Bo was no match for them at all. He was sent flying with a single move, spitting out blood. Gu Shang, Gu Ling, what are you doing? Even you guys want your assistants to torture you? Gu Bo roared. However, Gu Shang and Gu Ling did not seem to hear him and continued to charge towards Gu Bo. Their attacks were sharp and filled with killing intent. Haha, you don't have to shout anymore. They've been under my control for a long time. They're completely obedient to me. You can't stop me today. Ha ha ha. Gu Bo laughed. With a wave of his hand, a wave of God power swept out, covering Gu Xing and controlling her. At the same time, he moved and charged toward Lu Ming and the rest. Not good, Lu Ming and the rest were shocked. The other party suddenly had 2 3rd-level celestial deity powerhouses charge out. Their strength already completely said their side. They were absolutely not a match. Lu Ming retreated without thinking. However, Gu Xiong had already noticed him. He snorted coldly and waved his hand. A huge palm print came crashing down on Lu Ming. The terrifying aura had completely locked onto Lu Ming, making it impossible for him to escape. However, Lu Ming would not give in. He would not sit and wait for death. The 3 apocalyptic strikes, moon-cutting. Lu Ming growled and burst out with all his strength, turning into a shocking spear radiance and attacking the palm print. At the same time, the 9 ice chains stabbed at the palm print like 9 silver divine spears. Boom! Boom! With a series of explosions, the spear radiance as thick as a mountain range struck the palm print, stirring up violent energy. However, Gu Xiong's palm print was too powerful. It burst out with an abundant amount of energy and Lu Ming's spear radiance was shattered. Even the 9 ice chains were shattered one by one. However, the ice chains were only a secret technique. If they were shattered, they could still be reformed. Boom! Lu Ming was hit by the palm print and fell heavily to the ground. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. Many bones in his body were broken. He had been severely injured. He didn't die. Gu Xiong was slightly stunned. Although that move just now was a casual move, it was extremely surprising that it didn't kill a stage 1 true God. Chapter 2778 Reversal, Patriarch, don't kill him. Just kill him. It's too easy on him. I want to throw him into the formation and watch him die miserably as his flesh and blood are melted by the formation, the great elder shouted, his eyes extremely ferocious. His son had died in the formation because of Lu Ming. His flesh and blood had been melted. He wanted Lu Ming to die in the formation too. Only then could he vent the hatred in his heart. Alright, then send him into the formation. Gu Xiong nodded. He waved his hand and a powerful force gushed out. Lu Ming was pushed by this force and flew into the formation. He's back. Lu Ming was speechless. He gathered his divine power to resist the blood-red mist outside. And NBSP however, because of the battle outside, no one activated the array, so it operated rather slowly. The mist wasn't thick, so the number of ancient God descendants that had fallen was not particularly high. After sending Lu Ming into the formation, Gu Xiong attacked the others. The rest of the people couldn't resist Gu Xiong at all. They were all suppressed by Gu Xiong and sent into the formation one by one. Since they wanted to resist him, they should all turn into blood to nourish the ancient G.O.D. flower and help him obtain the heart of the ancient G.O.D. Gu boss men were all wiped out. Gu Xing was under Gu boss control and couldn't move at all, her face full of disappointment and anxiety. And at this moment, Gu Bo himself was also in danger. Under the siege of two experts of the same level, he was completely outmatched. He was already injured and couldn't hold on for much longer. Gu Bo, let's go in together. Gu Xiong said coldly as he personally charged towards Gu Bo. Gu Bo was already no match for him, and with Gu Xiong's help, it was even more difficult for him to fight back. After a few moves, he was hit by Gu Xiong and was seriously injured. Bang! Bang! Gu Shang and Gu Ling attacked from the front and back, each striking Gu Bo. Gu Bo's divine body almost exploded, and his injuries became more serious. He had no power to fight back. Gu Bo, go in. Gu Xiong said coldly. His vast divine power suppressed Gu Bo and sent him into the formation. In this way, Gu Bo and the others were completely annihilated. Grandpa Gu Bo, father, don't. Gu Xing shouted. Shut up. What I'm doing is the great matter of reviving the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. What do you know? Gu Xiong shouted coldly. With a flash of his body, he returned to the altar. Continue operating the formation. Gu Xiong ordered. Activate the formation. The first elder and the others appeared on the 8 cliffs to control the formation. Within the formation, runes filled the air and were extremely dazzling. The blood-colored mist was rapidly increasing. More and more descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. began to fall. Ah, Gu Xiong, you'll die a horrible death. You've lost your mind for your own selfish reasons. And NBSP many of the ancient G.O.D. descendants cursed and swore. However, Gu Xiong remained calm and unmoved. As the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. continued to fall, their flesh and blood seeped into the ground and were absorbed by the ancient G.O.D. flower. The flower became more beautiful and plump. The ancient G.O.D. flowers that covered the entire mountain gave off a strong fragrance. It's time. Gu Xiong's eyes were filled with anticipation. He quickly formed a hand seal and runes entered the altar under his feet. The altar glowed with a bright light. Lines of runes extended out like tentacles and merged with the array. Buzz! At that moment, the entire place where the 8 valleys gathered trembled. Then, all the ancient G.O.D. flowers emitted strands of blood-red energy that gathered toward Gu Xiong. Gu Xiong was immediately surrounded by a layer of blood-red energy. It's here, it's here. Haha, I'm going to condense the heart of the ancient G.O.D. Gu Xiong was ecstatic. They were called the descendants of ancient G.O.D.S., but in fact, the bloodline of ancient G.O.D.S. in their bodies was extremely thin, and their potential was also very limited. However, once he condensed the ancient G.O.D.S. heart, it would be different. His potential would be limitless, and his future improvements would be shocking. Sigh, is it still difficult to stop it? Gu Bo heaved a long sigh, full of helplessness. Ha ha ha, even the heavens are on my side. No, the heavens are on your side, kid. At this moment, in his knowledge sea, Bone Demon was laughing excitedly. You're still smiling so happily when we're almost done for. Lu Ming was somewhat speechless. Nonsense. Kid, your great opportunity has arrived. Bone laughed. Lucky chance. What kind of opportunity? Lu Ming asked. Those idiots. If they had killed you outside the formation, I wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. However, they acted smart and sent you into the formation. I have a way. Bone laughed. What is it? Lu Ming's eyes lit up. Don't you have the measure formula? You can use it to fight for the ancient God flower's energy with the patriarch. If you can attract all the energy, I have a way to make it yours and help you condense the heart of the ancient God, Bone said. This works too. Lu Ming was overjoyed. It should be possible. I can attract all the energy from the outside. The voice of the quant Tai formula sounded. Then all the members of the ancient God clan will die. Lu Ming frowned. There's no need. As long as the measure formula absorbs the energy from the outside and fights with the clan leader will suffer a backlash and the formation will stop. Don't worry, the ancient God flower's energy is enough to form the heart of the ancient God. It's just that the clan leader is too greedy. Bone said. Alright, let's not delay any further. Let's begin. Lu Ming said hurriedly. Watch this old lady. The measure formula was called out and the words emitted a dazzling radiance. Even Lu Ming's glabella was suffused with a layer of light. Hoo. A terrifying suction force was produced. The energy that was originally gathering toward Gu Xiong suddenly changed its direction and gathered toward Lu Ming. All of it surged into Lu Ming's glabella and entered the measure character. However, it was not refined this time. After the quant Tai formula, it immediately spread out and surged into Lu Ming's body. Condense, the bone demon made its move. It conjured a strange seal and guided the energy, directing it to Lu Ming's heart. What's going on? What's going on? At this moment, Gu Xiong roared furiously. Everything had been fine. The energy of the ancient God flower had been gathering towards him, and he had a feeling that he would be able to form the heart of the ancient God very soon. However, the energy outside suddenly changed direction and gathered toward Lu Ming. To his horror, he had already fused with the array. He could not control his body at all. The energy that he had just absorbed and even his own energy gushed out continuously and surged towards Lu Ming. That brat, stop. Gu Xiong roared in anger. What was going on? The others were also baffled and couldn't figure it out. Suck, ill suck. LL suck, the measure formula absorbed the energy from the outside world with all its might. The energy in the ancient God flower, including Gu Xiong's, continuously gathered toward Lu Ming. Chapter 2781 Condensing the Ancient God's Heart. Gu Xiong suffered from the backlash. The blood mist in the formation didn't become thicker. Instead, it became thinner. You little bastard, what have you done? Stop. Gu Xiong roared madly. He was about to go crazy. The energy he had absorbed from the ancient God flower had all been absorbed by Lu Ming. His own energy, blood, and essence had all been turned into blood qi for Lu Ming to absorb. His essence qi was being seriously consumed, and his body was quickly shriveling. This made him extremely frightened. At this moment, there was a crimson light spot shining at Lu Ming's heart. Energy from the quant Tai formula was constantly surging and gathering at his heart. Lu Ming was about to condense the ancient God's heart. On the ground, the ancient God flowers that had covered the entire mountain were also shriveling. This is the backlash. Gu Ba's eyes brightened, as if he had seen through something. He was very surprised. This way, at least the descendants of the ancient Gods wouldn't have to be buried with them. Close the formation. Gu Xiong roared. First Elder and the others quickly shut down the array. The light barrier disappeared, and the blood-colored mist disappeared as well. However, Gu Xiong did not obtain his freedom. He had been completely pinned down and merged with the formation. As long as the Liang word formula did not let go, he would not be free. D-A-M-N it, kill, go and kill that brat. Gu Xiong roared. Kill. First Elder and the rest charged at Lu Ming. Don't even think about it. Everyone, let's attack together and stop them. Gu Bo roared. Attack. With the disappearance of the formation, the people who were trapped in the formation could naturally attack. They launched an attack on the First Elder and the others in anger. There were many of them. All of them attacked and blocked the attacks of the First Elder and the others. Kill. Gu Shang and Gu Ling were under Gu Xiong's control. They followed Gu Xiong's orders and charged at Lu Ming. Let's stop the two of them together. Gu Bo gathered his remaining strength and brought a few heavenly God realm elders to attack Gu Shang and Gu Ling. Although Gu Bo and the others were at a disadvantage, they were able to delay their movements. What are you guys doing? I'm going to lead the descendants of the ancient GODs to glory, so why are you stopping me? You've betrayed your ancestors. Gu Xiong cursed like a mad dog. Gu Xiong, you've gone completely mad. You've sacrificed so many of your clansmen for your own selfish reasons. You're the one who has betrayed your ancestors. Gu Bo coldly shouted. However, Gu Xiong didn't seem to hear him. He just kept cursing. At this moment, his body had already shriveled up and turned into skin and bones, like a skeleton. His chi essence and blood essence were almost completely absorbed. Even if the Tai formula stopped now, he was already a cripple. The divine fire in his body had been completely extinguished. At the same time, the ancient God flowers that covered the entire mountain had completely shriveled up. All the energy was absorbed by the Tai formula and gushed into Lu Ming's body. Ancient God's heart, condense. The bone demon shouted in Lu Ming's sea of consciousness. Lu Ming's heart had completely changed. It was filled with a piercing blood-red color and was filled with endless energy. It was beating non-stop. And NBSP hoo-hoo. All of a sudden, extremely pure chi and blood gushed out from his heart and seeped into the depths of Lu Ming's body in an instant. Lu Ming's divine body was transforming rapidly. It was improving at an alarming rate. The ancient God's heart had been successfully condensed. Roar. At the moment when the ancient God's heart was successfully condensed, Lu Ming seemed to hear a loud roar from his heart that seemed to come from ancient times. He seemed to see an incomparably huge ancient God rampaging through the universe. With a punch, a star would explode. At that moment, not only was Lu Ming's divine body improving rapidly, but his cultivation was also improving rapidly. With an astonishing speed, he got closer to peak first stage true God. Soon, his cultivation reached the peak of stage 1 true God realm. Boom! A loud boom erupted from his body, and his cultivation broke through to the second stage of true God realm smoothly. Moreover, it was rapidly charging towards peak stage 2 true God realm. Ah, why? On the altar, Gu Xiong let out a miserable shriek. He knew that he had been completely defeated. He had become a cripple, and his life was hanging by a thread. As Gu Xiong was crippled, Gu Shang and Gu Ling's bodies trembled violently and they suddenly stopped. Initially, their eyes were filled with confusion, but at this moment, they regained their consciousness. Gu Bo, stop! Gu Shang roared. Gu Shang, you've recovered. Gu Bo stopped and was overjoyed. I've recovered. Gu Shang nodded and looked around. He sighed and said, good, I almost made a big mistake. Gu Xiong and Gu Luo, Gu Ling's eyes were extremely cold as he looked at the Great Elder and the others. His body moved and he rushed towards the Great Elder, sending a palm strike down. Not good, what? The First Elder was shocked and tried to block, but he was no match for Gu Ling. He was suppressed by Gu Ling's palm and spat out a mouthful of blood. Gu Bo, Gu Shang and the others also rushed over. The people who followed Gu Xiong were instantly suppressed. Why is it like this? The first elder was at a loss. Finally, his gaze fell on Lu Ming. At this moment, Lu Ming's body was blood-red, and he exuded a sense of majesty. This majesty made all the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. feel apprehensive. This was the suppression of their blood vessels. This meant that Lu Ming's blood vessels were much stronger than theirs. Ancient G.O.D.S. heart. He has actually condensed the ancient G.O.D.S. heart. Gu Shang muttered to himself in shock. It's indeed the ancient G.O.D.S. heart. I really didn't expect that Gu Xiong's scheme would end up benefiting someone else's disciple. Gu Bo also laughed. However, such an ending was already the best ending. The crisis of the descendants of the ancient G.O.D.S. had finally said. At that moment, the aura on Lu Ming's body slowly stabilized. The energy fluctuations on his body also disappeared. It's a pity that I'm just a little bit away from reaching the third stage of true G.O.D. Lu Ming sighed. Now, his cultivation was peak second stage true G.O.D. Kid, you're still not satisfied after getting such a great opportunity. Most of the ancient G.O.D. flower's energy was used to condense the ancient G.O.D.S. heart. Your cultivation has only increased by a little bit, and your divine body has also increased by several times. You should be satisfied. Bone said. Senior, what's the use of the ancient G.O.D.S. heart? Lu Ming asked. Forming the ancient G.O.D.S. heart has already given you a rich ancient G.O.D. bloodline. The ancient G.O.D.S. heart will automatically absorb the energy from the outside world to strengthen your divine body. Even if you don't cultivate in the future, your divine body will continue to grow. Do you understand? Bone said. It can continue to grow without cultivating. Lu Ming was dumbfounded. This function was really heaven-defying. An ancient G.O.D.S. gate. After knowing the function of the ancient G.O.D.S. heart, Lu Ming's heart was burning with passion. If his divine body continued to grow stronger, would he become as strong as an ancient G.O.D. in the future? Kid, I have another piece of good news for you. Just now, I kept absorbing energy, and there's still a lot of energy left in my body. Once I refine it, I'll transfer it to you, and your cultivation will increase by another level. The Quant Thai formula said. Really? Lu Ming was about to burst out laughing. This time, although the process was very dangerous, the harvest was also amazing. His cultivation had increased to the second stage of true G.O.D. realm, and he had condensed the ancient G.O.D. heart. His divine body was also several times stronger than before. With the strength of his current divine body, it was already enough to cultivate the battle character formula to 4 times his combat power. What a great harvest! Lu Ming collected his thoughts and calmed down. He scanned the crowd and his gaze finally landed on the First Elder. At that moment, First Elder was glaring at Lu Ming with a venomous look. You don't have to look at me like that. I have to thank you. If you didn't send me into the formation, I wouldn't have been able to condense the heart of the ancient G.O.D. Lu Ming smiled faintly. The Great Elder was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It was too late for him to regret. His intestines were green with regret. Previously, Gu Xiong had wanted to kill Lu Ming, but he had insisted on sending Lu Ming into the formation. He had never expected that he would help Lu Ming instead, causing their plan to fail at the last step. Gu Xiong was so infuriated that he almost died. He regretted not killing Lu Ming with a single blow. If he had, he would have been the one to condense the ancient G.O.D.S. heart. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. It was too late to regret now. Boom! 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 At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The place where the 8 valleys congregated, along with the 8 valleys, suddenly trembled violently. Even the ground shook violently. The ancient God flowers that had covered the entire mountain had already dried up. Now, they had turned into ashes and scattered. However, the ground was still emitting a blinding light. What's going on? What's going on? And NBSP many of the ancient God descendants began to cry out. Even Gu Xiong, Gu Bo and the others were at a loss, not knowing what was going on. The shaking of the ground became stronger and stronger, and the light on the ground became stronger and stronger. There was even an extremely terrifying aura that burst out. It was filled with an ancient and imposing aura. It was as if a mountain was pressing on everyone's body, and some people even almost spat out blood. Retreat, retreat! Gu Bo shouted, calling for the descendants of the ancient GODs to retreat. Only after retreating a long distance did the pressure lessen. Senior Gu Bo, what's going on? Lu Ming stood beside Gu Bo and asked curiously. I don't know. The gathering place of the 8 valleys is the holy land of the descendants of the ancient GODs. All the time, the worship of the ancestors has been carried out here, but such a situation has never happened before. Gu Bo frowned. He had lived for a long time, but this was the first time he had encountered such a situation. Boom! Boom! The ground where the 8 valleys gathered shook more and more violently. Finally, a huge pillar of light shot into the sky. There had been mysterious formations around the ancient GODs mountain, which was why it could be hidden from the outside world. However, at this moment, the light pillar shot up into the sky and broke the formation around the ancient GODs mountain. Once the formation was broken, the ancient GODs mountain would be exposed. As for the light shield, it directly shot into SPCE. The light beam was so bright that even those who were standing on another planet outside the ancient God star could see it, let alone the ancient God star itself. At least half of the people on the ancient God star had seen the light beam, and countless people were looking in this direction. Then. What's that? What a terrifying commotion. Could a peerless treasure have appeared? Let's go and take a look. With a flash of their bodies, they rushed in the direction of ancient GODs mountain. At that moment, Lu Ming and the rest were dumbfounded. Because at this moment, at the place where the light valley gathered, a door was slowly emerging. This was a huge bronze door that was 10,000 zhang in height. It stood tall between the heaven and earth, and there were many ancient God spirits carved on it. Could this be the legendary ancient God sect? Gu Bo seemed to have thought of something and shouted in shock. His old body was trembling with excitement. The gate of ancient God. It must be the gate of ancient God. The legendary gate of ancient God that leads to the world of ancient GODs. I didn't expect the place where the 8 valleys gathered to have a hidden ancient GODs gate. Gu Shang and Gu Ling also shouted excitedly, their eyes burning with excitement. There was an ancient legend among the descendants of the ancient GODs. Legend had it that the gate of ancient God led to the world of the ancient GODs. If one had the chance to enter the world of the ancient GODs, one would have the chance to become an ancient God and become invincible in the world. How could they not be moved by this? The gate of ancient God that leads to the ancient God world. Lu Ming was shocked when he heard that. The gate of ancient God appeared. It stood between the heaven and earth and gave off a blinding light. The gate of ancient God was made up of 2 bronze doors that were tightly shut. However, as time passed, the light on the gate of ancient God became dimmer and dimmer. Finally, the light disappeared, leaving only an ancient bronze door standing between the heaven and earth. The vast pressure had also disappeared. Let's go and take a look. Gu Bo, Gu Shang, Gu Ling, and the others couldn't stay calm. They rushed toward the gate of ancient God. The other descendants of the ancient Gods followed closely behind, leaving only a few behind to guard the Grand Elder and the others. Giggle! Giggle! At this moment, Qiu, which had been on Lu Ming's wrist in the form of a bangle, turned into a round ball and floated in the air. A pair of eyes appeared on its eyes, and it stared at the gate of ancient God. Its mouth was wide open and it looked extremely excited. Little guy, what do you want to do? Lu Ming was a little curious. Giggle giggle. Qiu's big mouth kept closing, and its eyes were filled with greed as it stared at the door of the ancient God. Don't tell me you're thinking of gnawing at that bronze door. Lu Ming asked speechlessly. He did not expect Qiu to nod continuously. Lu Ming's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Little fellow, don't act rashly, Lu Ming instructed in a low voice. He took Qiu and flew toward the ancient God's gate. Gu Bo and the rest had already landed below the gate of ancient God. The gate of ancient God was huge. It was tens of thousands of feet tall and tens of thousands of feet wide. They were as small as ants before the gate of ancient God. Gu Bo and the others tried to push the gate of ancient God open, but it was like an ant trying to shake a tree. The gate of ancient God did not move at all. In the end, almost all the descendants of the ancient Gods joined forces to push the gate of ancient God, but the result was the same. Lu Ming also joined in, but it was useless. Brat, don't waste your time. This gate is extremely ancient and heavy. There is a great formation carved on it. You can't open it with just your strength. Bone said. Chapter 2781 King descends. Lu Ming smiled bitterly and shook his head. He retreated a distance and did not continue to attack. Qiu wanted to rush out several times but was stopped by Lu Ming. After all, there were so many descendants of ancient Gods present. He was really a little afraid that Qiu would cause some trouble. Gu Bo and the others tried all sorts of methods, but none of them worked. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, streaks of rainbow light flew over from the distance. It was as if meteors were raining down from the sky, and it was a very spectacular sight. The other people on the ancient God star had finally arrived. This. Could it be the ancient Gods mountain? Didn't our zone leader go to the ancient Gods mountain? Why did the ancient Gods mountain appear on its own? What a huge door. What's that? Let's go and take a look. One figure after another flew to ancient Gods mountain and the bronze gate. Get lost! Gu Bo shouted in anger, his heavenly God realm aura spreading out, causing these people to be shocked and retreat. The ancient God star was occupied by the dominators. The highest cultivation of those dominators was only peak Real God, and most of them had died in the ancient God mountain. The people who came now were not more than stage 6 of true God. Under the pressure of Gu Bo, they naturally did not dare to act rashly. However, as time said, more and more people arrived. They filled the sky, and the number was uncountable. Gu Bo let out a long sigh. With so many people, even if his cultivation was high, he couldn't suppress them. Moreover, the news would probably spread out very quickly. At that time, the major powers of the Qin Heaven Starfield would descend, and they would be even more helpless. In fact, the news had already spread. There were not only natives on the ancient God star. There were also disciples like Lu Ming who came from the Qin Heaven 13 clans to train on the ancient God star. They had already spread the news of the ancient God star's change and the bronze gate. Grand Elder, what should we do now? Someone asked Gu Bo and the others. Now, the ancient Gods mountain had been completely occupied by others. There were people everywhere, and they could no longer suppress the situation. Let's go, leave this place. Well, find another place to live. This place is no longer suitable for living. Gu Bo heaved a long sigh, feeling very helpless. The other descendants of the ancient Gods were also helpless. However, they knew that this place was indeed not suitable for living. When the powerful forces of the Qin Heaven Star Domain descended, they would definitely not be able to protect the ancient Gods mountain. If they were not careful, they might even face the calamity of extermination. Let's go, Lu Ming. We're leaving. Take care. Gu Bo cupped his fists at Lu Ming. Take care. Lu Ming nodded. Lu Ming, let's meet again if there's a chance. Gu Xing also walked over to bid her farewell. Although Lu Ming had caused Gu Xiong to be on the verge of death, Gu Xing did not blame him. She knew that Gu Xiong had brought all of this upon himself. Moreover, Lu Ming had also saved most of the descendants of the ancient Gods. Take care. We'll meet again if there's a chance. Lu Ming smiled. And NBSP, the descendants of the ancient God race, all left and disappeared into the horizon. As soon as the descendants of the ancient Gods left, the crowd immediately flew toward the gate of ancient God, trying to open it. Of course, the gate of ancient God couldn't be opened with just a large number of people. No matter how hard they tried, they still couldn't open it. At this moment, Lu Ming quietly approached the ancient Gods gate. Little guy, do whatever you want to do, but be careful. Lu Ming instructed Qiu. Giggle. Qiu immediately scuttled out, opened its mouth wide, and bit at the bronze door. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He stared at it nervously. Creak, creak, creak. Qiu bit the bronze door ruthlessly, emitting an ear-piercing sound. Boom! The bronze door trembled, and a terrifying pressure spread out. Ah, what's going on? Many people were directly sent flying by this pressure. Not good, Lu Ming's expression changed. Qiu bit even harder and gnawed with all its might. Its sharp teeth actually bit into the bronze door. Squeak! At this moment, wisps of lightning spread out from the bronze door, emitting terrifying energy fluctuations. Not good, Qiu, quickly retreat. Lu Ming quickly shouted. That was because the wisps of lightning were spreading towards Qiu. Giggle. Qiu mustered all its strength and bit with all its might. Finally, he bit off a small piece of bronze and retreated frantically, but it was already too late. A wisp of lightning struck Qiu's body, and Qiu was sent flying. Ball, Lu Ming was shocked. He ran in the direction where Qiu was blasted and saw that Qiu had crashed heavily on the ground and was no longer moving. Lu Ming's heart beat wildly. He ran over hurriedly and realized that Qiu's entire body was black, as if it had been burnt. Lu Ming's heart sank. However, in the next moment, Qiu's round body rolled twice, and its big mouth appeared again, biting a few times with a giggle sound. This guy was fine. Lu Ming felt at ease. This guy, you're even willing to throw away your life for food. Lu Ming carried Qiu and scolded jokingly. Qiu transformed into a bangle and wrapped itself around Lu Ming's wrist. Its aura was very weak. Qiu had been struck by the lightning from the bronze door and was severely injured. I should leave first. Many people were already looking at Lu Ming. In a flash, Lu Ming left the ancient Gods mountain and came to a mountain more than 100,000 miles away. He observed the changes of the mountain from a distance. More and more people gathered around the ancient Gods mountain. A few days later, there was indeed an important figure who arrived. A terrifying character descended from the sect closest to the Qin Heavenly 13 clans. This person was enveloped in a divine light, emitting a terrifying pressure. Everyone was suppressed by this pressure and almost vomited blood. They all retreated frantically, leaving the bronze door. The figure stood alone in front of the bronze door. Boom! The figure suddenly made a move. A terrifying divine light blasted towards the bronze door, trying to blast it open. Boom! A violent boom erupted from the bronze door, but after the boom, the bronze door remained unmoving. "Open it, die!" the figure shouted. His divine power burned like flames, and an even more terrifying aura burst out. Many people's bodies trembled and they spat out large mouthfuls of blood. They were almost crushed to death. Back off. Quickly retreat. Countless people retreated in a frenzy, terrified. What a terrifying aura. Even though he was more than 100,000 miles away, Lu Ming could feel a terrifying pressure pressing down on him. He could only retreat. He only felt better after retreating another 100,000 miles. "Kid, that's a God king," Bone said indifferently. "He's indeed a God king." Lu Ming gasped. This was the first time he had seen the king of Gods in action. The power was truly earth-shattering and could swallow mountains and rivers. It was extremely terrifying. If one were to say that heavenly deities were the experts of the Qin Heaven Star region, then kings were definitely overlord-level characters of the Qin Heaven Star region. Ouyang Qingxiang kings were much more powerful than heavenly deities. When the king was enraged, the stars exploded. Legend had it that when many kings fought, they could even shatter an enormous life planet. It was enough to imagine how terrifying kings were. Countless people stood in the void far away, looking at the ancient Gods mountain. Boom! That king made his move again, bombarding the bronze door. Boom! 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 The bronze door emitted a blinding light and blocked the divine king's attack. However, it also caused a terrifying vibration. Lu Ming and the rest stood in the void. The ground of the ancient God star was shaking. There were even cracks on the ground that extended into the distance. Countless people present were shocked by the might of the God king. They instinctively retreated a distance and watched from afar. Boom! Boom! The God king kept retreating, but it was useless. He couldn't open the bronze door. In fact, bolts of lightning as thick as a mountain shot out from the bronze door and blasted towards the divine king, forcing him to retreat. What a terrifying might! At the sight of the power of the lightning, Lu Ming was filled with fear. The power of the lightning that attacked Qiuqiu earlier was not even 1/10,000th of this. Otherwise, no matter how strong Qiuqiu's vitality was, it would only end up turning into ashes. "It seems that you can't do it alone." A voice came from the distant starry sky. When the voice had first sounded, it had still been in the starry sky outside the ancient God star's atmosphere. However, by the time it had finished speaking, a figure had already appeared near the God king. The aura exuded by this figure was equally terrifying. Without a doubt, he was also a God king expert. You might not be able to open it either. The God king from before coldly snorted. "Try it and you'll know." The God king behind him said coldly and attacked the ancient God gate. A terrifying tremor erupted, but the result was the same as before. The God kings behind couldn't open the gate of ancient God. As time passed, more and more experts arrived. The major characters of the Qin Heavenly 13 clans arrived one after another. Even the divine kings kept on arriving. And NBSP behind them, the major figures of the three hegemon factions, as well as members of the Kong Xian sect and the other sects, had all sent their God kings. Even the Ice Soul clan and the Red Flame clan had sent their important figures. Clearly, the appearance of the ancient God sect had already shocked the Qin heaven star system. However, despite so many forces and experts' repeated attempts, they could not break through the gate of ancient God and enter the world beyond it. There's a formation here. Only an expert skilled in formations can open it. King said. Following that, the news spread out, and the experts from the Qin heaven starfield who were proficient in formations also rushed over. This formation is complicated. It'll take at least a few decades to 100 years to break it. Finally, a formation master came to a conclusion. It'll take so many years. It seems like it's impossible to open the bronze door in a short period of time. I thought there would be a show to watch. It'll come back in the future. Many people shook their heads and left the ancient God star. It's time for me to leave. This trip can be considered a complete success. Lu Ming pondered for a while, then left the ancient God star and headed for the Kongxian sect. After a long journey, Lu Ming returned to Kongxian sect. News of what had happened on the ancient God star had spread throughout the Qin heaven star system. Many people in the Kongxian sect were discussing this matter. However, as time passed, the door still did not open, and the popularity slowly diminished. In the Kongxian sect, most of the discussions were about the sect compet. Tian. There were a large number of outer and inner sect disciples in Kongxian sect. Therefore, a sect compet. Tian would be held every once in a while. As long as one could show off their skills in the sect compet. Tian, not only would they gain fame, but they would also receive generous rewards. The sect compet. Tian was in 3 years' time, and many people were already rubbing their fists and wiping their palms, eager to try. However, Lu Ming was not interested in this at all. During this trip to the ancient God star, a large group of zone masters had died at his hands. The storage rings of those zone masters had all fallen into Lu Ming's hands, and he had obtained a large number of treasures and divine crystals. Therefore, Lu Ming did not care about the rewards of the sect compet. Tian at all. If he had the time, he might as well cultivate. He did not see Qiu Yu when he returned to his residence. Lu Ming guessed that Qiu Yu was cultivating in the Divine Pulse Tower or some other place. Lu Ming sat cross-legged in the garden, quietly comprehending the battle character formula. Now that his divine body had improved by several times and his battle formula had quadrupled combat power, he could cultivate it. As expected, once his divine body improved, his comprehension of the battle character formula was smooth. Not long after, Lu Ming successfully broke through the bottleneck and cultivated to 4 times his combat power. Boom! Lu Ming's body exuded a strong fighting spirit and his body contained a terrifying power. 4 times the battle power. Lu Ming's eyes shone brightly. Now, his cultivation was at the peak of the second stage of true God realm. If he were to display 4 times his fighting power, he would definitely be able to defeat or even kill an opponent like Lu Zhong. It's a pity that the chances of triggering a 4-fold increase in combat power are still not high. Lu Ming pondered. He had just made a breakthrough. After Lu Ming's research, the probability of triggering a 4-fold increase in combat power was only 1 in a few dozen. It had to be triggered dozens of times before it could be successfully triggered. However, Lu Ming was full of confidence. As long as he had a deeper understanding of the battle character formula, the chances of triggering it would naturally increase. Just like how his combat strength was doubled or tripled, it would reach a 100% success rate. Someone's coming. Lu Ming ended his cultivation and his expression suddenly changed. He sensed that someone was flying toward his courtyard. Lu Ming opened the door of the courtyard and walked out. He saw 5 figures flying towards him. Wu Zifeng, Yu Linglong, 2 of them were Wu Zifeng and Yu Linglong. There were 3 other people who came with Wu Zifeng and Yu Linglong, but Lu Ming did not recognize them. It was obvious that a young woman was the leader of the three. This woman was extremely beautiful and could cause the downfall of a city. This woman, Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. This woman's appearance was somewhat similar to Yuexin. Two young men followed behind the woman, protecting her like her bodyguards. Lu Ming, you're finally back from outside. Yu Linglong asked with a smile. I just came back. Is there something you need? Lu Ming said with a smile. My cousin is looking for you. So, we came to find you as soon as we heard that you were back. Yu Linglong said with a smile. Your cousin? Lu Ming's gaze shifted to the young woman. Unfathomable. This was Lu Ming's first impression of the young lady. This young man's cultivation was unfathomable. Lu Ming could not tell how strong he was. Come, let me introduce you. This is my expression, Ouyang Qingxiang. She's my Aunt Yuexin's daughter. Yu Linglong said. She's Yuexin's daughter indeed. Lu Ming's heart stirred. When he saw Ouyang Xiangxiang, Lu Ming felt that Ouyang Xiangxiang was somewhat similar to Yuexin. Yu Linglong also said that she was her cousin, so Lu Ming had such a guess. Discussing cooperation with the Saintess. I'll tell you another piece of news. My cousin is the Saintess of the Kongxian sect. Yu Linglong said with a smile. Holy Maiden. This time, Lu Ming was really shocked. Kongxian sect had a total of 5 saint sons and 2 saintesses, and they were all qualified to compete for the position of sect leader. He did not expect Ouyang Qingxiang to be one of the 2 saintesses. Holy Virgin Ouyang, it's an honor to meet you. Lu Ming cupped his fists and greeted him. I've heard about you for a long time, Lu Ming. You entered the Kongxian sect as the top disciple of the Qin Tian 13 clans. When you first entered the Kongxian sect, you were only at the Demi-G. O.D. realm. However, in just a few decades, you entered the true G.O.D. realm and became an inner sect disciple. Such a cultivation speed is truly shocking. Ouyang Qingxiang smiled. I was just lucky, just lucky. Lu Ming said a few humble words and changed the topic. I wonder why Holy Virgin Ouyang has come to find me. I won't beat around the bush. I'm here to invite you to join my faction. How about it? Ouyang Qingxiang said. As expected, Lu Ming pursed his lips slightly. Indeed, Ouyang Qingxiang had come to invite him to join her faction. However, Ouyang Qingxiang, the saintess, had come personally. Her sincerity was not bad. Unfortunately, Lu Ming had no intention of joining any sect. He did not want to listen to anyone's orders. Holy Virgin Ouyang, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't plan to join any faction at the moment. Lu Ming said. You don't want to join. Lu Ming, you have to consider it carefully. The Ouyang Holy Maiden was stunned. She did not expect that Lu Ming would reject her when she personally came to invite him. That's right. Lu Ming, you should consider it carefully. My cousin is such a beautiful woman and she's single. Yu Linglong said softly and winked at Lu Ming. Lu Ming touched his nose speechlessly and shook his head. I appreciate your kind intentions, Holy Virgin Ouyang. However, I really have no intention of joining any faction. Little brat, don't be ungrateful. The saintess has already given you a lot of face by personally coming to invite you, yet you still refuse time and time again. You really don't know what's good for you. That's right. This kid, doesn't he know the situation he's in? The Tianhong sect and the Floating Light sect both want to kill you. Do you know that our Holy Maiden is taking the risk of falling out with the Tianhong sect and the Floating Light sect by inviting you? Do you understand? The 2 young men behind Ouyang Qingxiang couldn't hold it in any longer and started to berate her. You two, shut up. Ouyang Qingxiang scolded the 2 young men and made them shut up obediently. Lu Ming, if you don't want to agree, I won't make things difficult for you. I'll take my leave now. Ouyang Xiangxiang cupped her hands. Wait. At that moment, Lu Ming suddenly called out to Ouyang Qingxiang. Ouyang Qingxiang's eyes lit up. She thought that Lu Ming had changed his mind. Holy Virgin Ouyang, although Lu Ming has no intention of joining your faction, it's still possible for us to work together. Lu Ming said. Cooperation. Ouyang Xiangxiang was slightly taken aback. That's right, cooperation. Well, cooperate. Lu Ming nodded again. Kid. The two young men behind Ouyang Qingxiang couldn't hold it in any longer. One of them shouted, Brat, who do you think you are? How dare you talk about cooperating with the Holy Maiden? Do you really think you're the number one figure? That's right. Our saintess controls a faction, countless experts, and countless resources. What are you? What qualifications do you have to cooperate with our Holy Maiden? Why don't you take a PISS and look at the reflection? Ridiculous, simply ridiculous. The two young men looked at Lu Ming with disdain and contempt. You two, stop talking. Ouyang Xiangxiang glanced at the two young men in dissatisfaction. Lu Ming smiled faintly and could not be bothered with the two young men. He looked at Ouyang Qingxiang and said, Holy Virgin Ouyang, you have to consider this carefully. Lu Ming's expression was calm and full of confidence. Ouyang Xiangxiang was in deep thought. But the two young men couldn't take it anymore. How arrogant. I'd like to see what qualifications you have to be so confident. What qualifications do you have to talk about cooperation with the saint? A young man roared and stepped forward, a powerful aura erupting from his body. He raised his hand, and the thick divine power condensed into a huge hand, which pressed down on Lu Ming. Ouyang Qingxiang's eyes flickered, but she did not stop him. She also wanted to see how strong Lu Ming's combat strength was. Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng wanted to stop it, but it was too late. Stage 7 True God Realm. This young man's cultivation was at the 7th stage of True God Realm, and he was a heaven's favorite with extremely powerful combat strength. A huge palm print pressed down on Lu Ming. Whoosh! Lu Ming pointed his finger and a stream of finger force, like a spear's gleam, attacked the palm print. Pft! The palm print was directly penetrated by the finger force and collapsed. The young man was shocked. He did not expect Lu Ming to break his move so easily. Take this. Horn Dragon Divine Seal. The young man roared and activated a divine skill to the extreme, blasting it at Lu Ming with great power. However, the young man's cultivation was only at the 7th stage True God Realm after all. No matter how strong his combat strength was, Lu Ming did not take him seriously. It's my turn now. Lu Ming's cold voice was heard. A long spear appeared and swept out. Boom! When the young man's huge seal collided with the spear light, it emitted a dazzling light and then shattered. The spear light did not stop and continued to press down on the young man. Bang! The young man was sent flying by the spear light and he coughed up a large amount of blood. This battle strength, Ouyang Xiangxiang's beautiful eyes were filled with shock. Lu Ming's combat strength had completely exceeded her expectations. A 2nd stage True God actually completely crushed a 7th stage True God Heaven's favorite. This kind of fighting power could be said to be terrifying. This guy has become even stronger. Even though Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng knew how terrifying Lu Ming was, they could not help but sigh. The other young man behind Ouyang Qingxiang was almost scared to death. He stared at Lu Ming with a pale face. Do you still want to try? Lu Ming looked at the young man and said coldly. The young man shivered and broke out in a cold sweat. He did not dare to step forward. His combat strength was only on par with the young man from before. He would still be crushed by Lu Ming if he went up. Impressive, impressive. Brother Lu's combat strength is unrivaled. I've seen many geniuses, but I've never seen a genius like Brother Lu. Ouyang Xiangxiang sighed repeatedly. Now, are you qualified to cooperate with the Holy Maiden? Lu Ming smiled. Of course you're qualified. If Brother Lu isn't, who is? Ouyang Qingxiang said. Although Lu Ming's current ability was strong, Ouyang Qingxiang did not take him seriously. What she valued was Lu Ming's potential. Lu Ming was so talented. If he grew up, he would definitely have a place in the Kongxian sect. It was not impossible for him to break through to the Sky Celestial Realm and become the 8th saint of the Kongxian sect. Chapter 2784 Gathering of Saints, but, I'm afraid that some of the heaven's favorites under the saintess will be unconvinced and object. Lu Ming smiled, as if he was implying something. Why would I? Ouyang Qingxiang smiled and turned to the two young men. Her face darkened. You too, apologize to Brother Lu. Her voice was cold and stern, exuding a sense of majesty. The two young men's expressions were ugly. They walked toward Lu Ming with their heads lowered and bowed. We were blind before. Please forgive us and don't lower yourself to our level. It doesn't matter. Lu Ming waved his hand. Holy Virgin Ouyang, let's work together. I believe that you won't regret your decision today. I've never regretted anything I've done, Ouyang Qingxiang smiled, and the two of them chatted for a while before Ouyang Qingxiang took her leave. Lu Ming, you're getting more and more powerful. We're no longer your match now. Yu Linglong pouted and said. I'm surprised by your cultivation. Lu Ming sized up Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng curiously. Their auras were extremely robust and their cultivation had clearly reached the 4th stage of true G-O-D realm. It should be known that when they were in the Dark Dragon's secret land, the two of them had just broken through to the 1st stage of true G-O-D realm not long ago. In just a few years, the two of them had broken through to the 4th stage of true G-O-D realm. Such a cultivation speed could be said to be shocking. Lu Ming had the help of the Quant Tai formula and a series of fortuitous encounters to achieve his current cultivation. He did not expect that Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng's cultivation speed was not slower than his. Some time ago, Zifeng and I went back to his hometown and did some ghost-like training. I thought I could far Serpa SU, but I didn't expect you to be so abnormal. Yu Linglong said helplessly. Lu Ming's eyes flickered. It seemed that Wu Zifeng's background was not simple. By the way, Lu Ming, Kongxian sect's intersect tournament is about to begin. Are you going to partake? P8. Yu Linglong asked. I'm not partake. P8ing. I'm not interested. Lu Ming shook his head. That's a pity. If you were to partake P8, you would probably surprise everyone. Yu Linglong's face was full of pity. Both of them chatted for a while before Yu Linglong and Lu Ming bade them farewell and left. Lu Ming returned to his room and continued cultivating. The sect tournament of the Kongxian sect was a grand event for the sect because it was a tie-in between the 7 factions of the Holy Sons and Holy Virgins. Each sect had many outer and inner disciples. In the sect tie-in, which faction had the upper hand and which faction was stronger played a vital role in the future development of that faction. Some new disciples would make their choice according to the strength of their faction. It would even affect the opinions of some of the higher-ups in the sect, and it would have a significant impact on the future tie-in for the position of sect master for a certain Holy Son or Holy Virgin. All the major factions placed great importance on this. Therefore, in the past few years, the genius disciples of the various sects had all returned to the Kongxian sect to increase their strength and weight for the sect tie-in. The Tianhong Saint Sun's faction and the Transient Light Saint Sun's faction also put Lu Ming's matter aside for the time being and focused on preparing for the Kong Xian Sex Intersect Compat. Tian. Lu Ming paid no attention to the outside world and focused on cultivation. Time flew by, and 3 years said in a flash. The sect Compet. Tian was about to begin. What was worth mentioning was that in these 3 years, Lu Ming's cultivation had advanced another step and he had reached the 3rd stage of true G-O-D. At the ancient G-O-DS mountain, Lu Ming had absorbed the energy of countless ancient G-O-D flowers and condensed the heart of the ancient G-O-D. His cultivation had also advanced to the peak of the 2nd stage of true G-O-D. He was only 1 step away from the 3rd stage of true G-O-D. After 3 years of cultivation, his cultivation level had finally improved, and his combat strength had increased by another level. Of course, his divine body was constantly improving under the nourishment of the ancient G-O-D's heart. Although the speed wasn't fast, the effect would be shocking in the long run. Most importantly, he didn't need to spend time and effort to cultivate it, and it would naturally strengthen. This was the terrifying part of the ancient G-O-D heart. At that moment, Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng came to look for Lu Ming. Lu Ming, are you really not going to partake? P8 in the sect Compet. Tian. Yu Linglong asked again. Im not partake. P8ing, I have no interest. Lu Ming shook his head. Then let's go and take a look. All the experts from the 7 major sects have come out. Many of the experts on the real G-O-D ranking list will fight. It will definitely be very intense. I wasn't even born in the previous sect Compet. Tian. Yu Linglong said. Kong Xian Sec's Intersect Tournament did not have a fixed interval. Sometimes, it was held every 10,000 years, and sometimes, it could be held every few 100,000 years. The last sect Compet. Tian had been over 80,000 years ago. Real G-O-D ranking list. Lu Ming's gaze flickered. The true G-O-D gang, as its name suggested, listed a group of the strongest true G-O-D level people. However, it was completely different from the virtual G-O-D ranking list. The virtual G-O-D ranking was only a ranking list in the Kong Xian sect, and it listed the strongest virtual G-O-D powerhouses in the sect. As for the real G-O-D ranking list, it wasn't limited to the Kong Xian sect. It would be faced with the Qin Heaven 13 clans. On the true G-O-D ranking list, there were a total of 100 top experts in the true G-O-D realm. They were all from the Qin Heaven 13 clans. Without a doubt, this ranking list had a huge influence in the Qin Heaven Star region. Those who could be listed on the Real G-O-D ranking list were all top experts in the Real G-O-D realm. Lu Ming was also very curious. How was his current combat strength compared to the top experts of the true G-O-DS gang? Alright, let's go and take a look together. Lu Ming nodded. Then, he, Wu Zifeng and Yu Linglong headed in the direction of the sect Compet. Tian. The location of the sect Compet. Tian was in the middle of the inner and outer sect area. There was a vast piece of land here, which was very suitable for the Compet. Tian. In the middle of the open SPCE, there was a huge fighting ring. At this moment, the fighting ring was surrounded by people. Lu Ming and the group flew over and blended into the crowd, not attracting much attention. The Tianhong Saint Sun is here. Suddenly, someone shouted, and everyone looked in one direction. Lu Ming also looked over curiously. A group of people flew over. The leader was a young man in luxurious clothes. He had an oblique aura and a confident smile on his face, as if he had everything under control. The people around him were all elites. They were all geniuses from the Tianhong Saint Sun's faction. Is this the Tianhong Saint Sun? Lu Ming's eyes flashed with a cold glint. Le Jeune was from the Tianhong Saint Sun's faction. The enmity between him and the Tianhong Saint Sun's faction was growing. He felt that he would have to fight the Tianhong Saint Sun sooner or later. The sacred sun of reflection is here too. Suddenly, someone shouted. Sure enough, another group of people flew over from another direction. The one in the lead was a young man in a white shirt and white pants. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he was handsome. This person had an extraordinary bearing. He was the sacred sun of reflection. The people following the sacred sun of reflection were all geniuses. Lu Ming saw Huang Wen among them. The Supreme Saint, the Tianhong Saint Sun's faction and the Sacred Sun of Floating Lights faction faced each other from a distance. Powerful battle intent filled the air. The compet. Tian had yet to begin, but the scene was already filled with the smell of gunpowder. My cousin is here. Yu Linglong cried out happily. Holy Maiden Qingxiang is here. Then, someone shouted. In unison, everyone's eyes turned to look into the distance, especially the male disciples, whose eyes were glowing. In the distance, a group of people flew over. This group of people was mostly female disciples, with only a few male disciples. Many of the female disciples were extremely beautiful. No wonder many of the male disciples' eyes were shining. The person in the lead was Ouyang Qingxiang. Is that Holy Maiden Qingxiang? She's indeed a national beauty, she's so beautiful. She's truly a peerless beauty. Many of the outer sect disciples had never seen Ouyang Qingxiang before, and their eyes were all shining. The Tianhong Saint Sun and the Transient Light Saint Sun also looked toward Ouyang Qingxiang, their eyes burning. Buzz! Buzz! And NBSP whoosh! In the distance, people kept flying over. The other holy sons and holy virgins also arrived one by one. Holy Sun Ji Xia led his sect's people here. The Yen Kong Saint Sun had led his faction here. Holy Maiden Xue Tan also led her faction to the battlefield. Soon, 6 of the 7 holy sons and holy virgins of the Kong Xian sect arrived. Without a doubt, they were all unparalleled geniuses and unfathomable. There's also the Supreme Holy Sun. I wonder if he'll personally come this time, it's hard to say. The Supreme Holy Sun is the strongest of all the holy sons. The Supreme Holy Sun's faction is also the strongest of all the holy sons. The Supreme Holy Sun didn't appear in the last sect compet. Tian. I hope that the Supreme Holy Sun can show himself. He's my idol. Many people were discussing this. Among the 7 holy sons and holy virgins of the Kong Xian sect, the Supreme Holy Sun was undoubtedly the strongest and the most promising one to inherit the position of sect leader in the future. Therefore, the Supreme Holy Sun's faction was also the strongest. In the last sect compet, Tian, the Supreme Saint didn't appear, but his sect still dominated, suppressing the other sects of the Saint and Saintess. 2248 in the last sect compet. Tian, the Supreme Saint didn't appear, but his sect still dominated, suppressing the other sects of the Saint and Saintess. Look! The people from the Supreme Saint's faction are here. Someone shouted. A group of people flew over from the north. There were many of them, far more than the other holy sons and holy virgins. Then. The Supreme Holy Sun, it's really the Supreme Holy Sun. The Supreme Holy Sun has personally appeared. Someone exclaimed in excitement. The Supreme Saint. Lu Ming's gaze also looked over. A large group of people was flying in their direction. However, Lu Ming noticed a young man in the middle with one glance. This young man was tall and burly. His eyes were like stars, and his face was as sharp as a knife. He was full of dignity and had an air of supremacy. Lu Ming knew that this person must be the Supreme Holy Sun without anyone saying anything. As soon as the Supreme Saint Sun arrived, the Tian Hong Saint Sun, the Transient Light Saint Sun, Ouyang Qingxiang, and the others all looked grave as if they were facing a great enemy. The people from the Supreme Holy Sun's faction stood at the side and waited in silence. In just a short moment, many figures flew out from the depths of the inner gate area. The sect master of Kong Xian sect, Long Zhou Shan, had arrived. There were also some inner sect elders who arrived. Now, the number of people is almost here. I announce that the sect compet. Tian has officially begun. Just like the previous years, the outer sect disciples will first compete on the stage. The higher the ranking, the richer the rewards. Now, for the outer sect disciples who have registered, I will draw lots to decide their opponents. An inner sect elder landed on the fighting ring and announced the rules of the compet. Tian. Then, he drew lots to start the compet. Tian. First, the outer sect disciples took action, and a fierce battle began. However, Lu Ming was not very interested in the compet. Tian between outer disciples. Moreover, there weren't many experts worth paying attention to. People like Wing Demon, Feng Yuan Dao, and Madman, who used to be in the top 10 of the virtual G.O.D. ranking list, had already broken through the true G.O.D. realm and become inner disciples. Now, there were fewer talents in the outer sect, and there was a shortage of new talents. However, many people were still watching the battle seriously, especially those from the factions of the Seven Saints and Saintesses. They were looking at the geniuses from the outer sect. If they didn't join any factions, they could come out and invite them. The compet. Tian between the outer sect disciples lasted for half a month before it finally ended. After that, it was time for the compet. Tian between the inner disciples. The inner sect disciples, compet. Tian was the real highlight and would attract a lot of attention. Of course, not all inner sect disciples had to partake. P8. The rule was that only true G.O.D. realm experts had to partake. P8. When one reached the heavenly G.O.D. realm, because the number was too small and they were too strong, they didn't need to partake. P8. The battle between the true G.O.D. realm experts, each major sect sent their true G.O.D. realm experts, it was indeed very exciting. Lu Ming was also dazzled by the scene. There were all sorts of different races, all sorts of divine skills, and even all sorts of secret arts. All of them had extraordinary power and all sorts of divine abilities. However, on the whole, it was still the Supreme Holy Sun's faction that suppressed the others. In the end, all the major sects finally sent their top experts on the Real G.O.D. ranking list. There were only 100 people on the Real G.O.D. ranking list. When they were split among the Qin Heaven 13 clans, each clan had less than 10 people. Moreover, the number of people on the Real G.O.D. ranking list had always been dominated by the three overlords. Kong Xian sect had a total of 8 people on the Real G.O.D. ranking list. These 8 people were all from the Seven Saint and Saintess factions. The other 6 Holy Sons and Holy Virgins had 1 each, while the Supreme Holy Sons faction had 2. Boom! Boom! In the fighting ring, 2 top experts on Real G.O.D. ranking list were fighting fiercely and colliding continuously. The experts on Real G.O.D. ranking list are indeed shockingly powerful. Lu Ming looked at it carefully and sighed in his heart. The 2 people on the fighting ring were both stronger than Lu Zhong. One should know that Lu Zhong had been at the peak of the true G.O.D. realm for countless years. He had cultivated quite a few divine skills to the peak of the 4th stage and controlled king-grade divine power, so his combat strength was not weak. However, both of them were above the music. The Real G.O.D. ranking list listed the strongest group of people in the Real G.O.D. stage, and it was not just for show. One of them was from the Tianhong Saint Sun's faction, while the other was from the Wuxia Saint Sun's faction. The two of them exchanged hundreds of moves. In the end, the expert from the Tianhong Saint Sun's sect won by a slight margin and defeated the other party. The Tianhong Saint Sun smiled, while the Wuxia Saint Sun looked gloomy. The Tian continued, and it was already at the final stage. It was all the battles between experts on the Real God ranking list, and every match was extremely exciting. A few more days said before the Tian finally ended. This time, it was still the Supreme Holy Sun's faction that suppressed everyone else and took first place in overall strength. There was one person from the Supreme Saint Sun's faction who was terrifyingly powerful. He was ranked 6th on the Real God ranking list. The top 10 of the Real God ranking list were mostly occupied by the three overlord forces. They were ranked 6th on the Real God ranking list, which showed how powerful they were. This person was the number 1 true God expert of the Kongxian sect, and there was no doubt that the Supreme Holy Sun's faction would be the number 1. Bestowing Lu Ming with the Title of Saint. The Tian was over, and the rewards were given out. After this battle, the prestige of the Supreme Holy Sun's faction naturally rose to another level. No one could compare to it. The other Holy Sons and Holy Virgins all looked solemn. If this continued, the position of the future sect master would probably fall to the Supreme Holy Sun. I must get that thing. That way, I will be able to fight against the Supreme Holy Sun. The Tianhong Saint Sun clenched his fists. Alright, I hereby announce that the sect Tian has officially ended. The sect leader of Kongxian sect, Long Zhousan's voice resounded throughout the entire area. However, he paused for a moment before he continued. However, I still have a big announcement to make today. There's something big to announce. Many people were stunned and revealed curious expressions. Even most of the inner sect elders revealed curious expressions. It was obvious that they didn't know what Dragon Boat Mountain was going to announce. Today, I'm going to confer a new Saint Ti. The voices of Dragon Boat Mountain rang out together. What? A new Holy Sun? He's going to be made a saint. This is a big deal, but there hasn't been anyone suitable for it recently. That's right. The only suitable candidate is the number 2 figure from the Supreme Holy Sun's faction. Is he going to be independent? The Dragon Boats Mountain's words caused the entire place to clamor. Everyone was speculating who the Dragon Boats Mountain was going to confer as the son of Saint. It was not that easy to become a saint. First, one had to be a heavenly God, and the divine power they could control had to be above the divine grade. Only by fulfilling these 2 conditions would one be qualified. And now, there was only one person who fulfilled these 2 conditions, and that was the second in command of the Supreme Sect. This person was also a peerless genius. Back then, he had the opportunity to be conferred the Title of Saint. However, he gave up the position of saint and sided with the Supreme Saint. This caused a huge uproar back then. The 7 Holy Sons and Holy Virgins also frowned. The 8th saint was about to appear. Canonizing a son was a big deal. It meant that their Tian would be even greater. Furthermore, every additional son would have a huge impact on the current situation. Everyone was trying to guess who the Dragon Boats Mountain was going to confer upon as their saint. However, they didn't feel confident. Then, everyone's gazes fell on Dragon Boat Mountain, waiting for their answer. The dragon boats stood high in the sky and looked around. Their gaze finally landed on Lu Ming and they said loudly, "The Holy Sun I'm going to confer on him is Lu Ming." As he said that, Dragon Boat Mountain pointed at Lu Ming. Everyone's eyes were focused on Lu Ming. Then, the entire place fell into a dead silence. Lu Ming was also dumbfounded. He had never expected that the new saint that Dragon Boat Mountain was going to confer upon him would actually be him. Initially, just like the others, he was curious to know who the newly conferred son was. He did not expect it to be him. For a moment, he couldn't quite wrap his head around it. Lu Ming, this is a mission I'm giving you. You must accept the position of the Holy Son. Lu Ming heard the voice of the Dragon Boat Mountain. What the hell is this old man doing? Lu Ming finally calmed down slowly and his mind was racing. He didn't think that Dragon Boat's Mountain had good intentions. This old fellow had placed the dark dragon blood curse in his body, so he definitely didn't have good intentions. Lu Ming, you've become a saint. Bull. You're awesome, brother. Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng were also dumbfounded and could not recover from their shock for a long time. It's him. Is he the son that the sect master is going to confer on you? Everyone stared at Lu Ming, dumbfounded. The key is, who is he? Yeah, I've never seen him before. Many people shouted. After all, Lu Ming had only joined the Kongxian sect for a few decades, while many people would go into seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. Most people had not seen Lu Ming before. It's him. I know him. He just entered the sect decades ago. What? He was conferred the title of Holy Son when he just entered the sect decades ago. You must be joking, shush. Lower your voice. Be careful not to be heard by the sect master. But how is this kid qualified to be the saint? The scene was in an uproar. Lu Ming, a person who had just joined the sect a few decades ago, was actually conferred the title of saint. What was going on? It's this brat, the Tianhong Saint's son, the transient light Saint's son, and the others all glared at Lu Ming with sword-like eyes. Sect master, this subordinate feels that this matter is inappropriate. At this moment, an old man walked out and cupped his fists towards the Dragon Boat Mountain. What's wrong with it? Dragon Boat Mountain said indifferently. Lu Ming has only joined the sect for a few decades. His current cultivation base has only broken through to true God not long ago. No matter how you look at it, he doesn't have the right to confer the title of a saint. The old man said. The elder was an inner elder and Ing Tsang's master. He was from the Tianhong Saint Son's faction. Ing Tsang, the heaven's favorite who was ranked 4th on the virtual God ranking list, had been secretly taken in as a disciple by this person. Later on, he was killed by Lu Ming in the Dark Dragon secret realm, and this person had always hated Lu Ming. Since Dragon Boat's Mountain wanted to confer Lu Ming the title of the Holy Son, he naturally had to step out and oppose it. That's right, sect master, you must not do this. Following that, a few more inner court elders stepped forward to object. It was obvious that these inner elders all belonged to the factions of the Holy Sons and Holy Virgins. Are you all doubting me? Dragon Boat Mountain said indifferently, yet he had a terrifying might. The few inner court elders were shocked and quickly said, I'm not questioning you, sect master. It's just that the appointment of a saint is a big matter, after all. Sect master should consider it carefully. That's right. The sect leader, Holy Son, and Holy Virgin are all peerless geniuses. Not everyone is suitable and qualified. The Tianhong Saint's son stepped forward and bowed to the Dragon Boat Mountain. Tianhong is right. To become the Holy Son, 2 conditions must be met. First, one must master the divine grade divine power. Second, one must reach the heavenly God realm. Lu Ming is only at the true God realm. How can he be qualified to be the Holy Son? Sect leader, please retract your order. The sacred son of reflection also stepped out and cupped his fists. Dragon Boat Mountain frowned. In the Kongxian sect, the status of the Holy Sons and Holy Virgins was even higher than that of the inner elders. The Holy Sons and Holy Virgins were all peerless geniuses. It wouldn't be a problem for them to step into the Divine King realm and become the overlord of a region. Their words would carry much more weight than the inner sect elders. After that, the Saint Sun Ji Xia, the Saint Sun Yen Kong, and the Saint Daughter Shui Ten all spoke, persuading the Dragon Boat Mountain to take back their orders. Only 2 of the 7 holy sons and holy virgins didn't speak. The first was the Supreme Holy Sun. He only sized Lu Ming up curiously, his eyes glistening, but he did not say anything. Naturally, Ouyang Xiangxiang would not say much. She and Lu Ming were partners. If Lu Ming could become the saint, he would be of greater help to her. She hoped that Lu Ming would become the saint. Chapter 2787 Can even fight true G.O.D.S. Lu Ming looked on quietly and did not say a word. He had been thinking about the purpose of Dragon Boat Mountain's actions. The dragon boat's intention was to push him into the eye of the storm and put pressure on him so that he could improve even faster and then work for him. Lu Ming felt that this was the most likely possibility. Are you guys doubting my judgment? Dragon Boat Mountain said indifferently, his voice turning cold. The Tian Hong Saint Sun, the sacred sun of reflection, and the others didn't say anything else, but their expressions said it all. They opposed it. Alright, since that's the case, they'll give you a chance. Dragon Boat Mountain's gaze became incomparably sharp as he said, each of your major sects can send a true G.O.D. stage expert to challenge Lu Ming. If anyone can defeat Lu Ming, I will retract my order and cancel the T.I.T. If no true G.O.D. can defeat Lu Ming, then Lu Ming will become the new Holy Sun. Do you have any objections? The Dragon Boat Mountain's words caused many people's hearts to tremble. All the true G.O.D.S. from the major sects could challenge Lu Ming. If they won, Lu Ming would not be able to become the saint. What is Lu Ming's cultivation level? Someone quickly asked. I've seen it. It's 3rd stage true G.O.D. Someone said. Those whose cultivation levels were much higher than Lu Ming's could still tell Lu Ming's cultivation level at a glance. What? Only at stage 3 true G.O.D. realm? With such a low cultivation, any true G.O.D. realm expert should be able to defeat him. That's right, it's strange. What does Sect Master mean by this condition? We definitely can't win against Lu Ming. Strange, this is strange. Many people were puzzled. Dragon Boat's Mountain seemed to want to confer Lu Ming the T.I.T. of the Holy Sun. However, the conditions that they offered clearly showed that they did not want Lu Ming to be the Holy Sun. No one would think that a stage 3 true G.O.D. could win against those true G.O.D. geniuses from the 7 great factions. What a joke. Stage 3 real G.O.D. was just a low-rank real G.O.D. How could he compete with those middle-rank and high-rank real G.O.D.s? Especially when the 7 major sects had experts on the real G.O.D. ranking list. Those existences could kill Lu Ming with one finger. There was no comparison at all. The eyes of the Tian Hong Saint Sun, the Transient Light Saint Sun, and the others also lit up. Although they knew that Lu Ming's combat strength was very strong, there was a limit to it. He could not possibly be a match for those high-level true G.O.D.s. From their point of view, Dragon Boat Mountain's actions were only to give them a way out. Alright, I agree to this suggestion. I also agree. The Tian Hong Saint Sun and the Transient Light Saint Sun immediately expressed their opinions. The other Holy Sons and Holy Virgins also agreed. Lu Ming, do you dare to accept my challenge? Dragon Boat Mountain's gaze landed on Lu Ming again. Why wouldn't I? Lu Ming said loudly. Since things had come to this, it was obvious that the Dragon Boat's Mountain wanted him to take over the position of the Holy Sun. He would take it then. Lu Ming was not someone who was afraid of trouble. Whoa, this guy really dares to accept the challenge. He's really not afraid of death. Even if he doesn't die, he'll be abused. There's a good show to watch. Many people sneered and looked like they were watching a good show. Lu Ming, good luck. I hope you can successfully become a saint. Yu Linglong waved her fists and cheered for Lu Ming. Brother Lu, you can definitely do it. Wu Zifeng also patted Lu Ming's shoulder. They had seen Lu Ming suppress Ouyang Qingxiang's two subordinates. They were extremely powerful. If Lu Ming were to take action, he might have a chance of winning. Sect Master, can we fight to the death in this battle? The Tianhong Saint Sun said, his eyes filled with cold killing intent. Since you want to fight, then let's fight to the death. Dragon Boat Mountain said. Regardless of life and death, that meant that he could kill. This kid is finished. Many people looked at him with pity, thinking that Lu Ming was dead for sure. I'm going to fight this kid. A voice was heard. A young man from the Sacred Son of Floating Lights faction stepped down and landed on the fighting ring. It's Huang Wen. Huang Wen is about to make his move. Someone shouted. That's right, this person was Huang Wen. Huang Wen is at the 8th stage of True God realm. To deal with a mere 3rd stage True God, once he makes a move, he uses an 8th stage True God. This is also making a mountain out of a molehill. He's indeed making a mountain out of a molehill. However, I heard that Huang Wen has a grudge against Lu Ming. I guess that's why he took action. I see. He's trying to seize the opportunity to kill Lu Ming. Many people were discussing. Big brother, kill him for me, ha ha ha. In the crowd, Huang Wu roared in his heart as if he could already see the scene of Huang Wen killing Lu Ming. Boom! Huang Wen landed on the fighting ring. He exuded a powerful aura that pressed down on Lu Ming. Kid, how do you want to die? Speak. Huang Wen's cold voice sounded. He was full of confidence in himself. He was also a genius. Moreover, his cultivation had reached stage 8 True God, dealing with a stage 3 True God was absolutely a matter of certainty. Unfortunately, he did not know that 2 of the Floating Light Saint Sun's sex elites had already died at Lu Ming's hands. He did not know that Lu Zhong had also died at Lu Ming's hands. They only knew that Lu Ming had gone out for a while and returned safely. They did not know that those people had been killed by Lu Ming. They only thought that those people had not found Lu Ming. If he had known that Lu Ming had already killed those people, Huang Wen would not have been so confident. You talk too much. Make your move. I'll give you your last chance. Lu Ming said indifferently. Big words, storm fist. Huang Wen shouted coldly and threw a punch at Lu Ming. With a punch, a rumbling explosion came from the sky. It was like a huge wave that surged toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming's expression was calm. He condensed a long spear with divine power in his palm. 5 divine flames burned fiercely. Endless divine power gathered in the long spear and he swept it out. Boom! 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 A giant spear light shot into the sky and collided with Huang Wen's 10,000 wave fist force, creating a deafening explosion. Following that, Huang Wen's fist force trembled continuously and was crushed by the spear radiance. Huang Wen's expression changed drastically as he retreated to the edge of the fighting ring before he stopped. This, many people were dumbfounded, as if they had seen a ghost. This situation was completely different from what they had expected. They had expected Huang Wen to crush Lu Ming. However, they did not expect that Lu Ming would be able to push Huang Wen back with a single strike. How could the fighting power of a 3rd stage True God be strong to this extent? It. Huang Wen roared in his heart. His expression was extremely gloomy. Lu Ming's combat strength had exceeded his expectations. Just this bit of strength? If you have any delay skills that you haven't used yet, use them quickly. This is your last chance. Lu Ming said indifferently, his face full of disdain. You're looking for death. I'll let you see my true strength, vast wave saber technique. Die! Huang Wen roared. He took out a saber and charged at Lu Ming with all his might. With a slash, 10,000 layers of blade waves appeared in the void. They stacked on top of each other and headed toward Lu Ming. This was Huang Wen's trump card unique skill. Its power was extremely strong. When he executed it with his strength, ordinary stage 9 true God would be killed by him. Chapter 2788 Devil Curse, 3 Apocalyptic Strikes, Break the Sky. Lu Ming's combat strength doubled and he used the first move of the 3 Apocalyptic Strikes, Sky Piercer. A ray of spear light shot up into the sky and was extremely bright. Bang! 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 Huang Wen's 10,000 blade waves shattered one after another. In the end, the spear's light charged forward and clashed with the yellow text. In the next moment, all the energy fluctuations disappeared. The long spear in Lu Ming's hand also disappeared without a trace. Lu Ming landed on the fighting ring, his face expressionless. As for Huang Wen, his eyes were wide open in disbelief. A bloody hole appeared between his brows, and the front and back of the hole were bright. The light in his eyes quickly disappeared, and so did his life force. Plop! Huang Wen fell onto the fighting ring, no longer showing any signs of life. Huang Wen was dead. Most of the people present were dumbfounded. Huang Wen was actually killed by Lu Ming. This was beyond most people's expectations. A stage 3 true God actually counterkilled a stage 8 true God genius. This was also too exaggerated. Freak. Lu Ming is a freak. He's too abnormal. No wonder the sect master named him the saint. His combat strength is so terrifying. Many people mumbled to themselves. They finally understood why Dragon Boat Mountain had conferred Lu Ming the title of saint. Lu Ming was a freak. Without a doubt, the divine power he controlled was definitely divine grade or above. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to be so powerful. When he became a celestial God and a holy sun, it was a sure thing. It. The floating light holy sun's eyes were cold. Huang Wen's death had caused him to lose a great general. Big brother, ah! In the crowd, Huang Wu let out a mournful scream. His face was as pale as snow, and his face was filled with fear. In the outer sect of Kong Xian sect, he could get whatever he wanted because of his big brother, Huang Wen. Now that Huang Wen was dead, who else could he rely on? He knew that his future days would be difficult. Clean up the fighting stage. Dragon Boat Mountain instructed, and immediately, someone went down to collect Huang Wen's corpse. Who else of you wants to fight? Lu Ming's gaze shifted to the people from the 7 major factions. Mo-ing, go and kill him. The Tian Hong Saint's son instructed a young man behind him. This kid won't live. A black-robed young man behind the Great Hong Divine Sun said coldly. He took a step forward and landed on the fighting ring. It's him, Mo-ing, the Tian Hong Saint's son sent this person directly. It looks like he's determined to win. Many people were slightly shocked. In the previous sect compet, Tian Mo-ing had displayed shocking power. Although he was not as good as the 8 top experts on the Real God ranking list, he was not too far off. Mo-ying's cultivation was at stage 9 true God, brat, your strength is indeed powerful. I'm indeed surprised that you could kill Huang Wen at the 3rd stage of true God realm. However, your life should end here. The spectre said coldly. Huang Wen said the same thing before. Then, he died. Lu Ming's simple reply made the spectre's face sink. Don't compare me to that trash, kill. The spectre shouted and charged toward Lu Ming. However, it suddenly disappeared when it was halfway there. A speed type G.O. delay skill? No, this is a secret technique. Lu Ming's eyes flickered. A long spear appeared in his hand and he swept it in all directions. The spear radiance crushed over, but there was no trace of the demonic shadow. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound came from behind Lu Ming. The spectre was attacking him. The other party had unknowingly appeared behind Lu Ming. Get lost! Lu Ming shouted in a low voice and his divine power gushed out like a wave. With a wave of his hand, dozens of spear gleams pierced out in all directions. Clang! An explosion was heard in one of the directions, and a figure was sent flying. Hee, it's no use. Die! The spectre's figure flickered continuously. In an instant, hundreds of figures appeared on the fighting ring, circling Lu Ming. From time to time, a figure would rush toward Lu Ming but he would always be repelled. You don't seem to be able to defeat me like this. Lu Ming sneered. Is that so? Suddenly, hundreds of figures stopped at the same time and gathered into one. My setup is complete. Lu Ming, go to Hell, curse of the devil. Die. The spectre shouted coldly. A thick black aura emanated from his body. His hands kept forming seals. In the next moment, a burst of energy suddenly burst out from Lu Ming's body. This energy was extremely evil. He did not know when it had rushed into Lu Ming's body. At this moment, it exploded and formed pitch black and menacing ghostly shadows. They roared in Lu Ming's body, wanting to devour his flesh and blood. The fiend's shadow planted the fiend God ghost curse. This kid is dead for sure. The Tian Hong Saint Sun sneered. The floating light Saint Sun, the Jixia Saint Sun, and the others all looked on coldly. Lu Ming. Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng couldn't help but feel worried. Ha, Lu Ming, go to Hell. The spectre laughed wildly. No one in the true God realm would be able to break the curse. Even the experts on the real God ranking list would be in danger if they were planted. Was it planted during the collision? Lu Ming muttered. Previously, the other party had collided with him continuously. Every time they collided, Lu Ming could feel a weak wisp of energy rushing into his body. As the force was not strong, Lu Ming was not too concerned. Now that he thought about it, it must be the curse of the devil. This kind of devil God ghost curse was similar to the dark dragon blood curse cast by the Dragon Boat Mountain, but its power was 108,000 miles apart. My lord! Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He unleashed his ruler's divine power at full force and enveloped the demon God ghost curse. Chi and NBSP. The ghostly figures were like ice that had met fire. They immediately began to sizzle and quickly melt. You! How could you? How did you break my devil curse? The spectre suddenly cried out in disbelief. You're using such an insignificant skill to embark. Yourself. Lu Ming said indifferently. His body swayed as he cast the 9 heavenly Kunpeng technique and charged at the demonic shadow. Even if you break my devil curse, you can't kill me. The demonic shadow roared, his eyes filled with ferocity. He turned into many figures and filled the fighting ring. Is that so? Lu Ming's figure suddenly landed on the fighting ring. An extremely cold divine force spread out from his feet and covered the entire fighting ring in an instant, freezing it. In an instant, the fighting ring turned into a world of ice. Mo Ying's body suddenly froze. His feet were frozen, and the hundreds of figures on the fighting ring disappeared. This is cold divine power. How did this kid manage to cultivate cold divine power? Could it be that he has already cultivated the ultimate cold divine technique to its peak? But he's only been in the sect for a few decades. Many of the inner sect elders were shocked. The divine power that Lu Ming used previously was not the ultimate cold divine power. Could it be that Lu Ming had cultivated some kind of secret skill that concealed the elemental aura of the divine power? But even so, how could Lu Ming have cultivated the divine power of ultimate frost in just a few decades? Fighting an expert on Real God ranking list. Don't tell me, many people sized up the Dragon Boat's mountain and could not help but guess the relationship between Lu Ming and the Dragon Boat's mountain. Could it be that the Dragon Boat's mountain had already imparted the ultimate cold divine art to Lu Ming? Otherwise, they would never believe that Lu Ming could cultivate the ultimate cold divine technique to the peak in just a few decades. In the Kong Xian sect, there were also people who had cultivated the ultimate cold divine technique to its peak and successfully cultivated the ultimate cold divine power. However, it required extremely high talent and a long time. However, they didn't know that Dragon Boat Mountain was also extremely shocked in its heart. This kid can actually control the divine power of extreme cold. Dragon Boat's heart trembled. He knew that the divine power that Lu Ming controlled was a dominator's divine power. Now, he was actually using the ultimate cold divine power. Good. The stronger this kid is, the more successful that plan will be. Dragon Boat Mountain's eyes flickered. On the fighting ring, Mo Ing was extremely frightened. He tried his best to burst out, trying to break free from the ice. However, would Lu Ming give him such a chance? Lu Ming moved and appeared in front of the spectre. His cold eyes made the spectre shiver and break out in cold sweat. I admit defeat, the spectre roared madly. Did I allow you to admit defeat? Lu Ming said indifferently. He thrust his spear forward and killed the spectre. CSISI. Many people gasped. The spectre was dead. Huan Wen could not compare to Mo Ing. His combat strength was very strong. It was already very obvious during the sect compet. Tian. However, he had also died at the hands of Lu Ming. Lu Ming's ability was shocking. Lu Ming, you are courting death. At that moment, the Tianhong Saint's son was furious. His terrifying aura burst forth and pressed toward Lu Ming. He did not hide his cold-killing intent. Tianhong, what are you doing? Nearby, Ouyang Qingxiang also released her aura to block the aura of the Tianhong Saint's son. What do I want to do? Didn't you see that the spectre had already admitted defeat? He already admitted defeat, and this brat still killed him. He's simply too audacious. I'll kill him now. The Tianhong Saint's son said angrily. Hee, what a joke. Before the battle, they only said that it didn't matter whether you lived or died. They didn't say that you can't kill if you admit defeat. Lu Ming said indifferently. You, quibble, the Tianhong Saint's son was furious. His body was filled with terrifying killing intent. However, Lu Ming was right. Before the battle, they did say that they would not kill anyone regardless of their life or death. They did not say that they could not kill anyone if they admitted defeat. Alright, I'm done. At this moment, Dragon Boat Mountain waved his sleeves and said, it's true that we didn't say that we can't kill if we admit defeat. Let's explain it now. In the following battles, as long as we admit defeat, we must stop. The Tianhong Saint's son felt helpless when he heard the Dragon Boat Mountain's words. He could only cast a few cold glances at Lu Ming, and the killing intent in his eyes became even more intense. Saint, let me go and kill this brat. Another young man stepped out from behind the Tianhong Saint's son. The Tianhong Saint's son nodded and said, all right, let's end this quickly. Don't give that kid the chance to admit defeat. It was obvious that the Tianhong Saint's son was very confident in this young man. Don't worry, Saint. He won't have the chance to admit defeat. The young man said coldly. In a flash, he landed on the fighting ring. Sanguine Rain, it's Sanguine Rain who's about to attack. The young man's arrival on the fighting ring shocked many people. That was because Sanguine Rain was an expert on the Real God ranking list, one of the 8 experts on the Real God ranking list in Kongxian sect. He was also the strongest person in the Real God realm under the Tian Hong Saint Sun's faction. Lu Ming is going to fight with Sanguine Rain. I wonder what the outcome will be. If Lu Ming can defeat Sanguine Rain, it would be a miracle. He would be listed on the True God ranking list as a Stage 3 True God, that's right. Sanguine Rain is ranked 87th on the Real God ranking list. However, the strength of his fighting power is not something that Mo Ying can compare to. Many people were looking forward to this battle. Many of them had already begun to guess the outcome of this battle. An expert on the Real God ranking list? Come on. Lu Ming's eyes were filled with a strong desire to fight. Although he had seen the battles between experts on the Real God ranking list before, watching and fighting personally were two different things. Buzz. All of a sudden, Shuai's figure moved. However, his figure was not charging toward Lu Ming but to the sky. In midair, Sanguine Rain's body emitted a blood-red light. Blood Rain Barrier. Sanguine Rain let out a low roar. He pushed with both hands and a layer of blood-red light shield covered the entire fighting ring. The Sanguine Rain Barrier was a secret technique that Sanguine Rain cultivated. It was extremely powerful. He used his unique skill the moment he made his move, not giving Lu Ming a chance to retaliate. Kill! Sanguine Rain bellowed. In the Sanguine Rain enchantment, endless sanguine sword gleams suddenly appeared and slashed toward Lu Ming. What can a barrier do to me? Kill! Lu Ming let out a long howl and activated the 9-layer crimson gold armor. He cast the 9 heavenly Kuan Ping technique and soared into the sky. Rays of spear radiance burst out from his hands. Boom! 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 The spear radiance and the blood-red sword radiance collided with each other continuously, causing a deafening boom. Why is my divine power so heavily consumed? Suddenly, Lu Ming frowned. He could feel his divine power being rapidly consumed. The same move was consuming his divine power much faster than before. Do you feel that your divine power is rapidly being consumed? Under the suppression of my barrier, your divine power will be exhausted after a few moves, and you'll be at my mercy. Sanguine Rain laughed triumphantly. Then, more sanguine sword gleams appeared and attacked Lu Ming. Is that so? Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. They wanted to exhaust his divine power. You must be joking. If it had been anyone else trapped in the blood rain barrier, they would have been in grave danger and their divine power would have been quickly exhausted. However, Lu Ming had the measure formula. Boom! Divine energy kept emerging from the quant. Tai formula. Lu Ming's divine energy was always at its peak. 3 apocalyptic strikes, moon cutting. Lu Ming used the second move of the 3 apocalyptic strikes. The spear struck down and a crescent-shaped spear ray slashed out. Countless blood-red sword lights were destroyed, and the terrifying crescent-shaped spear light slashed toward the blood rain. Sanguine Rain's expression changed. In a flash, he appeared on the other side of the fighting ring, avoiding Lu Ming's attack. Within the blood rain enchantment, his speed was extremely fast. Such a powerful attack. Let's see how many moves you can use. Sanguine Rain snorted coldly. Is that so? I'll break your barrier first. Lu Ming's figure soared into the sky and blasted towards the barrier. Blood God Python, kill. The blood rain howled and blood-red pythons appeared in the barrier. There were more than a dozen of them and each of them was hundreds of meters long. They charged at Lu Ming. Moon slaying. Lu Ming continued to use the moon slash and annihilated a blood-colored python with one move. However, there were more than 10 blood-colored pythons. Ha ha ha, your divine power is about to be exhausted, Bloody burst out laughing. Lu Ming could not be bothered with the blood rain and continued to attack. Defeating another person, Lu Ming continued to launch attacks. Moon slaying. Moon slaying. Moon cutting. Lu Ming continued to cast the moon slash. One after another, the blood-colored pythons were destroyed. Soon, the dozens of blood pythons all disappeared. At this moment, the smugness on Sanguine Rain's face had completely disappeared and was replaced by shock, confusion, and disbelief. How is that possible? How can his Shen power not be exhausted? Sanguine Rain muttered to himself. Lu Ming's attack was shockingly powerful. It was definitely a unique skill. Such a move usually consumed a lot of divine power. Even if he was outside, Lu Ming could not use it continuously. Furthermore, in his Sanguine Rain barrier, the speed of divine power consumption was several times faster than the outside due to the suppression of the barrier. Logically speaking, Lu Ming's divine power should have been exhausted. But why was Lu Ming still so lively? Sanguine Rain was already dumbfounded. Boom! Lu Ming broke through the blood python's encirclement and finally struck the Sanguine Rain barrier. The blood rain enchantment shook violently, but it didn't break. I don't believe it, again. Lu Ming continued to attack, his long spear constantly blasting out. Boom! Boom! The blood rain enchantment kept shaking as if it was going to be broken at any time, but it managed to block it every time. Ha ha ha, Lu Ming, with your cultivation, you can't break my barrier. You'll be beaten up Sively. I don't believe that your divine power is endless. Even if I have to exhaust you, I'll exhaust you to death. Seeing that Lu Ming did not blast the Sanguine Rain barrier open, Sanguine Rain laughed and finally felt relieved. As long as Lu Ming could not break the Sanguine Rain barrier, he would be exhausted to death sooner or later. Whoosh! 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 More blood-colored sword gleams and blood-colored pythons appeared in the blood rain enchantment and charged towards Lu Ming. Just a little bit more, then. 4 times the combat power. Lu Ming's eyes gleamed as he activated his 4-fold combat strength. At the same time, he swept his long spear to block the attacks of the blood-red sword gleam and blood-red python. Lu Ming is in a passive position, that's right, but his strength is really shocking. He's been trapped in the blood rain barrier for so long and still has such battle power. It's really terrifying. Indeed, Sanguine Rain is no match for him in a head-on collision. What a monster. Unfortunately, his attack power is still unable to break the Sanguine Rain barrier. He will eventually be defeated by Sanguine Rain. It's a bit of a pity. In the Sanguine Rain enchantment, as long as the enchantment could not be broken, the Sanguine Rain could take the initiative and stand in an invincible position, exhausting the opponent to death. Many people felt that Lu Ming's fate was sealed since he could not break the Sanguine Rain enchantment. He would lose without a doubt. Kill, kill, kill. Sanguine Rain's body continued to burst with blood-red divine power, raising the power of the Sanguine Rain barrier to its peak. Countless blood-red sword cheese and blood-red pythons charged towards Lu Ming. At this moment, a low rumble came from Lu Ming's body. The fighting spirit in his body suddenly increased. The battle formula had been successfully activated. Moon slaying. Lu Ming let out a long howl and cast the moon-cutting move again. However, the power this time was much stronger than before. Bang! 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 A crescent-shaped attack burst out, and all the blood-red sword light and blood-red pythons were destroyed. Break! After Lu Ming destroyed the blood-red sword gleam and the blood-red python, he swept his long spear out again. This time, it was aimed directly at the blood barrier. Boom! There was a violent explosion. Then, the blood rain enchantment was pierced through, split into two, and exploded. How is that possible? Sanguine Rain roared in shock. It was simply unbelievable. Lu Ming clearly could not break the Sanguine Rain barrier earlier. How did he manage to do it again in the blink of an eye? Could it be that Lu Ming had been hiding his abilities? Not good. Retreat, retreat. Reacting, Sanguine Rain's figure retreated frantically. However, how could Lu Ming allow him to retreat? He cast the 9 heavenly Kuan Peng technique. In a flash, he quickly chased after the blood rain and attacked with the moon-cutting technique. The Sanguine Rain enchantment shattered and was no longer within the enchantment. The speed of the Sanguine Rain had been reduced by many times. It could not compare to Lu Ming at all and could not avoid Lu Ming's attacks. It could only resist with all its might. A blood-red armor appeared on his body, covering his entire body. Then, a sword appeared in his hands, and he slashed out. Clang! Lu Ming's attack landed on Sanguine Rain's combat sword. Sanguine Rain's combat sword trembled violently and finally exploded with a bang. This was a middle-grade divine artifact, but it was shattered by Lu Ming. Sanguine Rain's figure retreated rapidly and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. He was severely injured. I admit defeat, just as Lu Ming was about to launch another attack and kill Sanguine Rain in one fell swoop, Sanguine Rain hurriedly shouted. He felt that he would definitely not be able to withstand Lu Ming's next move. When the next move was unleashed, he would die. If he did not admit defeat now, when would he? Sanguine Rain admitted defeat and Lu Ming had no choice but to stop. Sanguine Rain quickly retreated from the fighting ring, blood still spurting out of his mouth. A deep wound appeared on his chest. Even his armor had cracked, and his bones could be seen. This was all thanks to Lu Ming's move just now. Sanguine Rain has lost. My God, Stage 3 True God actually defeated an expert on the Real God ranking list. This is too heaven-defying. Many people gasped in shock. The Tian Hong Saint Sun, the Transient Light Saint Sun, and the others were also shocked. They looked terrified. Lu Ming was too heaven-defying. In a few more years, they would have nothing to do with the Kong Xian sect. Even the Supreme Holy Sun, who had been calm all this time, became extremely serious. Amazing. Lu Ming is too amazing. Yu Linglong and Wu Zifeng muttered to themselves. Boss is mighty. In the crowd, An Hai, Lu Chang, and a few others were also watching. At that moment, their eyes were shining, and they were abnormally excited. They had already submitted to Lu Ming. The stronger Lu Ming was, the happier they would be. As for the outer sect disciples, they were all dumbfounded. Some people looked down on Lu Ming when he first joined the sect. However, they were not even fit to carry his shoes now. Moreover, only a few decades had passed. Said. Are there any more battles? Hurry up and come down. Lu Ming stood on the fighting ring and shouted. At this moment, his combat strength was at its peak, and he didn't want to waste any time. Everyone looked at each other. The Tian Hong Saint Sun, the Transient Light Saint Sun, and the others all looked gloomy. Shui Yu was the strongest true God in the Tian Hong Saint Sun's faction. He had no one else to send. The Sacred Sun of Reflection and the others had some subordinates, but they were not confident that they could defeat Lu Ming. Just now, Lu Ming had completely crushed Sanguine Rain after the battle. Therefore, no one made a move for a while. Was Lu Ming really going to become the 8th saint of Kong Xian sect today? Many people had such thoughts. Long Xian, you can make your move. At this moment, a majestic voice rang out. It was the Supreme Holy Sun. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.